This evening will be said by the very Reverend John S. Richardson of All Saints Church, Maidstone.
Ray York and Lionel Marchant. This evening we give thanks for the life of Ray York, for all that he contributed to this borough as a ward councillor and to this council during his time of office, and for Lionel Marchant of All Saints Maidstone, who gave so much of his musical integrity and business acumen to this borough over 50 years. We pray for their families and friends at this time of loss and mourning. So, Lord God, you showed us how to love. We shared memories of the past of joy and laughter, of sadness and disappointment. So now, as you brought our paths together in this place tonight, go with us as we set out to travel, each of us on the next step of our journey in the present to the future, through good times, through trouble and change, being open to one another and pursuing the common good, in listening and decision-making. So make us worthy of each other's best and tender with each other's dreams. Amen.
Lionel Marchant was organist and director of music at All Saints Church and was known by many, many mayors, including myself. And also Ray York was a planning officer for KCC in Gravesham as well, and he was well known in his party as well, and was a very well known character. So, thank you. Please be seated, everyone. Losing the plot here. There we go. Members, excuse me adjusting my light so I can just see a bit better. As on previous occasions, Councillor Round will be my eyes so I can see you all. So I know we probably will have quite a busy night tonight. So I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak who wants to speak. So Martin will pick you up for sure. Thank you. Let me just get the papers right. Yes, get the right size. Yeah, before commencing proceedings, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Also, these proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the Council, but if anyone else wishes to record or film them, please just simply say so that we know what's happening. So I don't know, I'm looking across to Councillor Mackay.
Mr. Mayor, I reserve my right.
Of course you will. Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Is somebody else? Oh, it's members of the public. Okay. Yes, you can. Okay, thank you. Are there any, first of all, there are some apologies for absence. And it's Councillors Field, Greenham, Kahili, Oliver, D. Wilkinson and J. Wilkinson. Are there anybody else? Apologies need to be given? No? Okay.
Councillor.
Did you say Councillor Field?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Marshall Jeffrey said out there.
Okay. Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
I think I wasn't sure whether you said Councillor Field or not.
Okay. Right. We've picked those up. Councillor Jeffrey?
Councillor Cooch as well.
Oh, right. Okay. Apologies, I just didn't see your hand. Okay. Are there any applications for dispensation? I look to. Are there any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are none.
Okay, thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest from members? No hands? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any disclosures by officers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
So I disclose an interest on behalf of all members of staff who are present this evening relating to the report of the Employment Committee, and because contained within there is the pay policy statement for 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume officers have got all that down. I assume so. It's okay. Thank you. Agenda item 5. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? This is the usual one. Can you see anybody? No hands? Well, that must be a first, I think. Okay. Thank you very much. That'll be recorded. Okay, agenda item 6. Is it agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed? Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Agenda item 7. Are the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the Borough Council held on the 4th of December 2024 agreed as a correct record? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 8. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Borough Council held on the 4th of December 2024 agreed as a correct record? Agreed. Thank you. Right, this is my bit. Thank you. Agenda item 9. This is Mayor's announcements. I have sent a list round of some of the most of the events that myself and my deputy councillor around have attended. It has been quite busy. We've had quite a lot of civic events to do, including several at Canterbury Cathedral and at Rochester Cathedral, which is always slightly difficult for me because luckily I have Ray and Ralph with me, and they stop me falling downstairs or bumping into things, which can be very easy in a medieval cathedral, believe me, if your sight's not quite 100%. But it has been quite an interesting time. Obviously, it is the Christmas time as well, so there's been a lot of celebrations and events. I have to say my waistline has taken a bit of a hit because of Christmas, but being mayor, actually, when in the summertime you have a lot of cream teas, in the winter time you have mulled wine and mince pies, and if you're a type 1 diabetic as I am, that's not a good thing to be involved with. But nevertheless, it's been a lot of fun as well, and we've had some very interesting events in terms of the Chinese New Year, which I was really impressed with, and also the Light Festival that we had here, which was absolutely fantastic because the weather was really poor, as I think quite a few councillors were there, and but we had a very big turnout, which says a lot, I think, for our community, actually, that people are prepared to come out. And I've had 2 very good events. The Gurkha Kitchen, which I held an event at, which was marvellous, and thank you to those councillors that came, because it is much appreciated. We had a lot of mayors coming, and we raised a good sum of money for my charities. And then fairly recently we've had quiz night, which again, well, a lot of people came, and it was, again, we've raised a lot of money for the charities. I have to say that Jan and myself sat on a table on our own, and we did appallingly badly, because the picture round literally killed us in the quiz. We hadn't got a clue, most of the people on it, and I think we came bottom or pretty well with a wooden spoon. But nevertheless, it was a lot of fun, and the quiz night went down very, very well. So that is very good. One other thing I wanted to mention was the Royal Naval Association. I attended an event there as well, and I am delighted that they've made. My father was a naval officer, and so I've been brought up with the Navy, but they made me an honorary member of the Royal Naval Association here, and I was quite touched by that. It was something I really appreciated, and certainly my father would have done as well. So that was really, really nice. Coming up, we've got an event at Rochester Cathedral, and we've got another event at the Apocryphis, I can't even say it, Hall in London, hosted by the Mayor of Bromley, who's been a big supporter of our events, actually. And we're going to his event there, which should be extremely interesting as well. And we've got a number of other events in the pipeline, so it's getting very, very busy again. I think they're the things I wanted to say. If anybody's got any questions of what I've been doing or what I'm intending to do, you know, I'm happy to try and answer them. No? Okay. Well, thanks very much, and thank you for your support as well. Thank you. Agenda item 10. There are no petitions this evening, which, given that we've got quite a long evening, that's a bit of a relief, I have to say. I shouldn't say that, but it is, I think. Okay. Agenda item 11, questions from local residents. And I've been notified, notification that Mr. Sean Turner wishes to ask questions of the leader of the council. Mr. Turner?
Good evening. Happy New Year to all. Maidstone Borough Council violates legal obligations by enforcing policies without public consent or valid justification. The council is proceeding with housing developments without demonstrating a clear local housing need. Maidstone Borough Council has confirmed through a Freedom of Information response that it does not hold essential data on housing applicants. The Climate Change Act 2008 requires environmental policies to be proportionate and evidence-based. Yet, Maidstone Borough Council enforces draconian net zero measures, restricting residents and businesses, despite the UK contributing less than 1% to global CO2 emissions. Kent's CO2 contribution is so small that these policies are statistically insignificant. Despite this, they are being used to justify costly decarbonisation schemes, increases in parking charges, planning restrictions, and penalties for landlords. The Representation of the People Act 1983 protects the public's right to vote in free and fair elections. Yet, this council actively participated in a failed attempt to postpone elections, an awful breach of democratic rights. Meanwhile, major planning decisions are rushed through with minimal public consultation, allowing unelected non-governmental organisations and private interests to dictate policies that should be accountable to the public. Question: Considering that Maidstone Borough Council has failed to demonstrate any legal or statistical justification for its mass housing developments, overlooked its obligations for transparency, and is implementing net zero policies without a sound scientific or legal foundation, we urge the Council to provide specific lawful justifications of these actions, and if no lawful basis is found, what prompt measures will be taken to restore public trust and address these serious concerns?
Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Firstly, the allegations of a lack of lawful basis for the Council's housing and net zero actions are completely unfounded. Planning legislation, including the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, sets out a series of requirements for local planning authorities across England. Our local plan was agreed with the Planning Inspectorate and voted through by the Council last year. Our housing targets are lawful, even if you don't agree with them. The Climate Change Act of 2008 sets out the country's requirements to reach net zero, plus, of course, so does the science. I have no intention of spelling out the science to you, as you're quite capable of looking for the evidence yourself, even if you disagree with it. And finally, the request to postpone the May County elections was at the request of Kent County Council, not Maidstone Borough Council.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Mr. Turner, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
I do. The Local Government Act 1999, Representation of the People Act 1983, and the Climate Change Act 2008 all set clear legal obligations that this Council appears to be violating. Question: can you confirm with the latest documented evidence whether this Council acknowledges these obligations, including reasons why they have been repeatedly ignored?
Councillor Jeffrey?
It sounds like the same as the first question. Those allegations are untrue and unfounded. So I won't be answering that question in detail. You're wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. There are only two questions from residents. The next question was from Kate Hammond, but unfortunately she can't. She's been unable to attend this evening, so she's agreed to ask the question for me to ask the question on her behalf, which I will proceed to do. Residents of Lenham have now been blighted for 6 years by the council's ill-conceived plans to build thousands of houses on hundreds of acres of greenfield land. Throughout this time, it hasn't taken much to scratch below the surface and realise the lack of substance and supporting infrastructure to the Heathlands plans. This council is now arranging further local resident engagement events next month on their latest proposal. Can you confirm that the material progress has been made to securing critical supporting infrastructure since Heathlands became an allocation in the adopted local plan this time last year? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Heathlands features an allocation within the adopted Maidstone Local Plan Review 2024. The site policy sets out the infrastructure requirements for the project. The next step for the local planning authority is to produce a supplementary planning document for the site that will in effect embellish the site policy agreed via the examination public and in turn inform the subsequent outline planning application. The timeline is for the SPD to be adopted by this council during the autumn of this year. Accordingly, it is appropriate that at the present time both the local planning authority and the site promoter focuses on the production of this SPD rather than other matters, although I'm aware that the site promoter is pursuing the provision of a new railway station for Heathlands through the appropriate channel and process, and that the promoter will be providing an update on this matter to the Heathlands Stakeholder Steering Group on the 28th of February, next week, I think that is. However, this particular piece of infrastructure is not required to have been delivered until the end of phase 1, so around 2037. So it's a long-term project to bring to fruition. Furthermore, the site promoters are developing a utilities infrastructure plan and are engaging with the relevant authorities, while the local planning authority is in discussions with relevant health authorities to plan the health infrastructure provision.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I should say that a written response will be provided for Ms Hammond. Agenda item 12, questions from members. May I remind members that as we have a lot of questions from members, I think we've got 7 at the moment this evening, and in according with the Constitution, the session is in theory limited to 30 minutes. But I will try and be a little flexible because I feel that every member's question should be given a chance to be raised. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. I've received notification that Councillor Springett wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the upcoming budget review, I see that the £1 million set aside by the previous Conservative administration to undertake work towards bringing forward the Leeds Langley Relief Road is to be removed. Can the Leader of the Council please confirm if he and his coalition partners support the provision of a Leeds Langley Relief Road, which is needed to relieve congestion in the town centre and through the villages of Leeds, Bearsted and along Willington Street? And if you do support it, why is this money being removed from the budget?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Proposals to safeguard land for the Leeds Langley Relief Road, LLRR, were included in the initial draft of the last local plan review. However, this proposal was ultimately rejected by the local plan inspector following the examination in public, so it does not feature in the the LPR that we have. However, one of the clauses did retain reference to the LLRR. It states the Council will continue to explore the funding and delivery of that and associated enabling development. Work has not yet begun on identifying sites for development in the next iteration of the local plan. Consequently, the future spatial strategy has not been considered. It is therefore not possible to make a decision on the merits of commissioning or carrying out further work to explore the LLRR and enabling development. Therefore, it is appropriate for the seed capital funding for this project to be removed from the Council's capital programme. Your question was pointed directly at my personal opinion and the opinion of my coalition partners in particular, and we are not keen on having that road. The enabling number of houses is estimated to be about 10,000 houses required to be built there to fund that road. Of course, that road, had it been built, will generate traffic. We'd much rather look at better alternatives than simply having more vehicles on our roads.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Springett, do you ask a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Walking and cycling may be feasible in the town centre, but they don't work for most of the borough, so they alone will not resolve the congestion which blights the lives of residents and businesses alike. Previous attempts for modal shift have not worked, and there is very little hope of a robust, affordable, reliable, borough-wide public transport service being provided by other operators. With even more housing and cars coming our way when the local plan is next updated.
Could you actually ask a question?
I will do.
Thank you.
Something your administration will be responsible for exactly what measures will you support or introduce if you won't support this much needed relief road?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. So clearly, the buses are in a bit of a state. They are really pushed. I think that comes down to, frankly, a lack of political will by various governments over certainly the last 15 years or so, and could be rectified. We are planning to provide some insight and some policy work around transport across the borough through one of our citizens' assemblies. So I'm hoping that you will be supporting our Citizens' Assembly approach in order to provide some of those answers that you seek.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received a notification that Councillor Russell wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, excuse me. The previous Conservative administration quite correctly froze parking charges between 2021 and 2025 to support our local businesses and residents. We also froze parking charges at Moat Park to encourage use of this fantastic space and asset. Why is the governing Green and Liberal Democrat administration increasing charges on Moat Park? In doing so, targeting dog walkers, those that want to enjoy nature, get outdoors, entertain the children, and importantly, exercise. These activities should not be made more costly.
Councillor English.
To a very large extent, the rationale behind increasing the parking charges at Moat Park is the same rationale as led to the previous Conservative administration that introduced the charges in the first place. We have a situation where Moat Park is, to our pride, and this is a good thing, so don't get me wrong on this, is being very intensively used. There is no issue about needing to encourage people into the park. What we don't want to do is encourage commuter parking, and we do want, over a period of time, to spread out the use of Moat Park and to use other parts of it. So the parking charges are essentially two things: to raise money to be further invested in the improvement of Moat Park, and you will see in our proposed budget there are significant additional improvements to Moat Park proposed, and also an element of demand management, which has to be taken in the context of the overall parking strategy. What we don't want to do is underprice Moat Park to the extent that we have people parking there all day and going off to work. I would say that in terms of the specific reference to dog walkers, that is to encourage dog walkers to actually be able to do this freely. That is the reason the charges don't apply until 10 o'clock in the morning, and also one of the major reasons why we have a quite keenly priced season ticket that is available for people to purchase. Dog walkers are likely to be amongst those who want to carry out that activity on a very regular basis. So I would anticipate that if they had a problem, they would be buying the season ticket rather than paying the daily charge. I certainly would. You may have a supplementary.
Thank you. Have you finished? No, you're waiting for the supplement. Don't put it on. Councillor Russell, thank you.
He was so keen he didn't want to sit down. Yeah, let's focus on now. It does sound like you're making the park a little bit elitist. The putting up of parking charges in Moat Park from £2 to £3 for 6 hours is a 50% uplift. And the kicking into the long grass of the new leisure centre seems to indicate a disinterest of sport and leisure and the health and mental well-being gained from being outside. Please outline how you value sport and leisure and access to the outside within your policies in light of these changes.
The problem with charges that are relatively low is that any increase will appear to be a very large percentage increase, and we can all play with statistics. The fact is that it is quite fiddly to play around with increases of a few pennies here and a few pennies there. So it is easier to actually, administratively, to actually have an increase of this level. It sounds a lot more than it actually is in its effect on people's pockets. As I said, we are investing money raised from these charges back into Moat Park. It's not the only source of income, obviously. We have events going on in Moat Park. We have a capital programme, which hopefully will be approved. And what we are, but it has to be seen as one of a number of measures that are continuing to improve the parks and open spaces of this borough, which the Coalition is completely committed to doing after years of underinvestment in our parks and open spaces by administrations of all colours.
Thank you, Councillor English. I've received a notification that Councillor Janetta Sands wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the stakeholders meeting for Heathlands, it became clear that the SPD, the supplementary planning document, has been given until November 2025 to complete. The inspector stated that these details were necessary to underpin the allocation. Given the significant amount of work needed, do you feel that this timeframe is acceptable to complete a job of this complexity?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. The stakeholder steering group has been established to oversee this task, which you note, and obviously you know that I chair that particular SSG. And the third meeting is due to take place next week. We will very soon be providing the stakeholder group with access to an online document store for the key project documents and records. I fully acknowledge that the time scales are very tight. There is a lot to do. I'm in pretty much daily contact with officers to make sure that this moves forward, and it is receiving my personal focus.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Sands, do you wish to supplementary?
Thank you, yes. One of the large items for the SPD will be information around transport. Bearing in mind that officers from NBC cancelled a meeting with KCC, National Highways and Homes England that was due to take place in January, can you tell members how the SPD can continue on its timeline when engagement on this massive subject is not taking place? Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
As I say, I think I probably refer to my earlier answer. It is getting my personal focus and attention and that of the senior directors in there. We will be working as hard and as fast as we can to make sure that we hit those timelines.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification that Councillor Tom Sands wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you very much. The Homes England and Maidstone Borough Council Partnership Agreement, signed under the previous administration, has been requested on a number of occasions. Most recently, following the initial stakeholder meeting, it was requested again for full transparency to be made available. Following yet another request being made subject of an FOI, can you explain and justify how such a fundamental document is not visible? Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. I can confirm we have received the request for the collaboration agreement. The document was originally exempt under Part 1 of Schedule 12A, Paragraph 3 of the Local Government Act 1972, information relating to the finance or business of any particular person being the widest sense, i.e. the authority holding that information. The original public interest test cited the reason for non-disclosures as commercially sensitive information. The Council takes its responsibilities regarding information requests seriously. This includes making sure that requests for information are processed and the information is proactively available. As part of the process, the Council is required to assess whether information can be made public, taking into account the wider impact of the information release by undertaking a public interest test. The Council is going through this exercise at the moment, and if any information needs to be withheld, we'll follow the correct process and justifications. Just so you know, obviously we have provided an acknowledgement to yourself for the request, and a 20-day working extension is allowed under this particular request, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification. Sorry. Oh, supplementary. I apologise. I'm jumping the gun.
Thank you. That's no problem at all. Thank you. We've been waiting to see this document for 4 years. This document is fundamental to the process and confidence of that process. Can I ask you to personally view it? I suspect you haven't seen it as well. And will you instruct officers to go away and redact the names and financial aspects? And when you are satisfied, pass that document to us as ward members to allow us to fulfil our function as ward councillors. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
I will personally give you my assurance that I will do everything within my power to get you a copy of that document in whatever form that I can possibly get it to you. In my power, that is.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification that Councillor Cook wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure the Leader is aware of the excessive and severe levels of traffic congestion that routinely afflict residents living in and travelling to Maidstone. These levels of congestion are particularly bad in the south and southeast of the borough and have been exacerbated by the lack of suitable infrastructure as a consequence of housing development policy that has relied solely on dispersal. The only mitigation being put forward at that time centred around a reliance on modal shift, which has clearly not materialised. The Leader, at public meetings and throughout his election campaign, argued against garden development such as Heathlands that would provide for new infrastructure as an inherent part of the development, and has expressed his personal preference for a return to a dispersal method of housing allocation. Could the Leader explain to road users and residents how a dispersal method of housing delivery will have any different outcomes in terms of in terms of traffic congestion to those experienced by Maidstone in the past?
Councillor Jeffrey.
At the present time, there are still sites in the process of being delivered that were allocated in the 2017 local plan, and an increasing number of sites coming forward that we allocated in the 2024 local plan review, to include strategic sites at Lising, Victor Barracks and Heathlands. Furthermore, I'm sure that in 2025, I hope that in 2025 my Cabinet will start some of the work on the process to create the next local plan. Regardless of which local plan, the Council has always worked tirelessly to collect developer contributions for the provision of transport infrastructure through a combination of Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy. Furthermore, the respective examinations in public for our 2 adopted local plans have demonstrated that the impact of new homes on the transport network is capable of being mitigated through a range of fully funded improvements. However, as the District Council, it is rarely within our gift to physically implement these improvements ourselves, but we need to pass monies to our delivery partners, including the likes of KCC and National Highways. It is important we continue to work closely with those partners through, for example, the Joint Transportation Board, to ensure those mitigations are delivered for the benefit of Maidstone residents. Realistically, these challenges will exist irrespective of the chosen spatial strategy at any one time. However, as you know, the infrastructure around roads remains problematic. We are not the planning authority, and the Highways Authority. Yes, we're not the planning authority, we're not the Highways Authority. Yes, thank you for that. I'm on question 8. My brain's starting to get addled. And we are working, as I say, with the partners to do that. One of the things we want to do is to provide some work on developing a strategy for active transport within the borough. We intend to do this through the approach of the Citizens' Assembly, which I think will be wholly successful, and I do hope that you support that approach, unless, of course, you're not keen on active travel and want more cars.
Councillor Cook, do you wish to have a supplementary?
I do, if I may, please, Mr. Ned. Thank you for your reply. When we look at congestion in and around the borough, and in one of the things that you've said this evening is new roads and infrastructure, therefore infrastructure generates traffic. New roads don't generate the congestion. It's new houses. It's the people that come to live in the area that create that congestion. We haven't built any new roads, and very little has changed to the road network in the last 15, 20 years, yet the congestion has been building up all the time. So I ask again, how do you think that a reliance on modal shift and active travel is going to reduce traffic when we are going to be building tens of thousands more houses as decreed by the central government?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, you are on Kent County Council. You do know they are the Highways Authority, don't you? We've never built any roads. It's down to them. And they're not spending the money we keep... would you mind letting me finish? Thank you. They're not spending the money we've given them. So, well, roll on unitary when we can have control over both, frankly.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I have received notification that Councillor Cannon wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Drugs cause significant harm to individuals, families and our local community in Maidstone. Class A drugs such as heroin, crack cocaine, synthetic opioids are some of the most destructive drugs and are rightly recognised as such by the drug classification system. The Leader of the Council suggested on BBC Politics South East, in his capacity as Leader of the Council, that he supported legalisation of Class A drugs and all other drugs without prior consultation of this Council. The Leader highlighted Portugal as an example of decriminalisation. This system has drug consumption rooms for Class A drugs. Where would he think is appropriate to locate the drug consumption rooms in Maidstone?
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. And thank you for your question, which does allow me to highlight my complete statement and a position rather than the partial one that you have made just now and made quite widely on social media. Yes, I personally called for the legalisation of drugs. This was a personal position, not a council position, but I also called for their regulation and for addiction to be treated as a health problem. This is in line with science, with the science around drugs. It is simply wrong to claim that I support legalisation without the rest of my statement, that it needs, because it does need to go with regulation and health treatments. I have made this point to you previously, but you continue to ignore that. You've also claimed I was speaking on behalf of Maidstone Borough Council. That was not the case. When you're in a debate such as that, you are there as an individual, no matter what or how the TV show tries to describe you. The continued illegality of drugs is quite obviously providing a market for organised criminal gangs. The US came to realise this quite quickly in Prohibition, and with that illegality comes an inability to regulate drugs, both in terms of how or who accesses them. And it doesn't allow for things like quality control or taxation. And whilst there are addiction services, by default anyone attending them for illegal drug addiction is a criminal, which hardly supports a positive treatment plan. Given that the last drugs needs assessment for Kent showed that around 10% of adults reported drug use in the previous year, that's a lot of criminals to arrest. In recent years, some countries have taken successful alternative approaches to tackling their drug problems. It is a complex and nuanced area with both successes and challenges, like most health and social issues. Just looking at one example, the legalisation of drugs in Portugal reduced deaths by 80%. I think that was a good outcome. And the continued criminalisation of drugs, as I said earlier, provides this market for criminal gangs. I want to get rid of those criminal gangs by removing their markets. The science is clear, and my personal position is in line with the science. And I think science, preventing deaths and reducing crime are good goals to have.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Cannon, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, please. So where do you want the consumption rooms in Maidstone if you were to decriminalise the system?
It's not I don't think I can answer that. I think just one last thing to say in terms of this. You will have watched that debate, and there was a harrowing story about in the start of that debate. A guy at the age of 10 was in an organised criminal gang, and he managed to escape and has turned his life around. He's helping others to escape. After the show, he messaged me and said, "I'm glad you were there. You were the only one who made sense." In terms of position, where a drug cafe would be, that's not a discussion for this chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. I've received notification that Councillor Dawes wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Policy and Management.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask to confirm that the 5 years land supply is intact?
Right. Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Dawes for this question, because I think it'll have a bearing on all of our wards going forward. And I can offer some reassurance for the present, but there is undoubtedly some jeopardy going forward. We know that very recently we published our authority monitoring report, and that did set out the fact that we still did have a 5-year land supply, but that finishing point was the end of the financial year 2023-24. So that was very much constructed under the 2017 local plan, and of course we're moving into the local plan review, which was adopted in 2024, which has slightly changed the reality at the moment. The local planning authority is going to review the position again for the end of 2024-25 to give us the most up-to-date figure. But the challenge, I think, attached to that is that, as you may recall, when the government recently issued changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, they required an additional 5% buffer on top of your 5-year housing land supply. So that is requiring officers to undertake work to calculate where we are going forward. And I've already had a lot of discussions with planning policy and development management colleagues on the situation as it goes forward, because it has a bearing on all sorts of decisions that the council make day to day. And a briefing on the matter has been arranged for the informal cabinet in the near future. And if the computations coming out of all this officer work do confirm that our 5-year land supply has been lost, this fact will be reported by the Head of Development Management, Rob Jarman, to Planning Committee early in Q1 in the next financial year, or as soon as is practical, because it is there's a lot of moving parts and it's quite complex to work out the scenario. So if we are without a 5-year land supply, we will then need to take that into account in our decision making, and we will need to look at a number of contingencies. Thank you.
I have a supplementary question. So you have mentioned about the monitoring reports that you have recently published. I've been reading through carefully, although I don't fully understand everything. I do understand that the government, the new policies that they've put on us, is making a mess of our local plan and asking us to build more houses than we had planned originally. So that's what's making the trouble. But what I was noticing in the report is the fact that in previous years, 2 to 3 years ago, we have built more houses than was requiring of us, to about 150% more, which actually depleting our land supply rapidly. So is there any measures on avoiding the developers to actually build the houses at a faster rate that is actually required of us legally? Because it seems to be quite a problem.
Yeah, as mentioned, there are lots of moving parts. So yes, there is that point around now there is an increased housing total under the new NPPF calculations, but I think that 5% buffer, which is significant, which is attached to the 5-year supply, is also a challenge. I don't actually think that the rate at which allocated sites come forward is having too much of a bearing on this issue. I think because in previous local plans we were delivering, but it's interesting, there was a debate earlier on about, do you put all your housing eggs in relatively few baskets, or do you put them in lots and lots of different sites? And I think that has a bearing on the way that sites come forward. And officers are already examining a range of scenarios and a range of potential contingencies. So I think I'll wait until we actually have the data and the figures, then we can report back on where we're going on that. But on that larger headline point, I mean, this administration inherited a spatial vision that we neither shared nor supported in this chamber. And I think it is undeniably true that that spatial vision relies upon some very large, complex sites, and therefore bringing them forward in a timely manner is quite a challenge. But we will, as I say, I need to defer to my professional officers to put that proper report together rather than answer on the hoof. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. And thank you, members, for answering all the questions so promptly, because I think it's a big agenda, and you've all done very, very well. So thank you from the chair. Agenda item 13. I call upon the leader of the council to submit his report on current issues. Councillor Jeffrey, you may speak for up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep this brief. Kent is not on the devolution priority programme, despite ministers promising we would be. This will be good news for some and bad news for others. We don't even know when or if we will have a Mayor of Kent. I will update members as news comes in, as I hope I've been doing for the last few months. We do know that we've been asked to continue with the local government reorganisation, i.e. the creation of unitary authorities and the dissolution of Kent County Council, districts, boroughs and Medway Unitary Authority. An outline plan needs to be submitted by all councils in Kent by 21st of March and a full plan by the 28th of November. The timetable beyond that is not completely clear, but the current assumption is we will exist until probably around April 28. The majority of Kent leaders want a fairly light submission on the 21st of March. I'm keen that this is underpinned with as much information as possible, and that we, as best we can, we take it through our internal democratic processes, PACs, Cabinet, etc. Although that timetable is very, very tight. Alongside the local government review, we've agreed to do a community governance review to consider whether the current unparished areas should have that tier of government, something that I personally think will be essential. On other matters, in a couple of weeks we have our COVID memorial events, including on the 4th and 5th, planting 633 trees in Watman Millennium Park, one for every person who died of COVID in the borough. And on the 6th of March, we've got the Award of the Freedom of the Borough to Key Workers, and memorial benches and a virtual memorial wall. So I think we've got quite a memorial month coming up. I've talked a lot about the SPDs, but that work is continuing, not just around the 3 sites, but also for the HMO, which I'm hoping will go to PAC very soon, in the next week or 2. Obviously, we've been focused very much on corporate budgets and strategy, and also the slightly tweaking the timetables around the Gypsy and Traveller DPD, which is on today's agenda. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. That's very succinct, if I may say so. Thank you. I now call upon the other group leaders to respond, focusing primarily, but not exclusively, on the issues raised by the leader. You may speak for up to 5 minutes each. And I'd like to call upon Councillor Russell, leader of the Conservative group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're here, it's the budget tonight, nearly 1 year on since the new administration, but we finally have it, and the corporate strategy. The leaders forward on the corporate strategy came in at the last minute. It reminded me of my last-minute homework writing of my youth. Its references going beyond the 1,000 affordable homes target previously set, and to this I would ask how, when we've previously been told we're operating at full pace, and where, given the rapidly decreasing amount of the paltry brownfield land that we did have in the borough. You mentioned tackling the scourge of litter and fly tipping in the forward, yet I see no reference to it or how you intend to do this within the corporate strategy year 1, especially with the recent waste, crime and enforcement policy, which only had a minor refresh. Much electioneering was made of the fact that fly tipping would be improved beyond our previous Conservative administration's recent capability, and yet 1 year on, I still see the repeated fly tipping and note that people are having difficulty booking the bulky rubbish collection service. The report that we missed out on at the most recent overview and scrutiny, due to the untimely failing of the sound system and electrics at the Town Hall, mentioned that planning enforcement is stretched to breaking point, and yet we have a recruitment freeze in this area. How on earth will you start to make inroads into all of the planning issues that occur across the borough when you're not seeking to further resource this area and provide the hard-working staff that are there with further colleagues? It's the initial investigating officer post that is not being recruited to. Need I say more? Clearly it's not a priority. The corporate strategy forward mentions ambitious plans to better protect your most cherished local landscapes, and you've already set to work on the Greensand Ridge. Whilst undoubtedly nice, I have repeatedly countered that it's the view from the Greensand Ridge and down over the Low Weald, with its network of ponds, native trees and hedges and farmland, that is the real jewel in the crown. Presumably you intend to build all over this and any other areas in the borough that won't have your special safeguards. All of this without the Leeds-Langley Relief Road that would help alleviate the main problem, the traffic through town and the choking of the villages of Linton, Lewes, Leeds and Langley and Tovel. The £1 million that our previous Conservative administration had entered into the capital budget clearly wouldn't have funded it, but it was to start the reports that would be needed, to keep the hook in the local plan and to make our borough better for today's and future residents of our newly built areas, along with improving air quality in town and idling traffic, and to bring some respite to all of those that suffer trying to cross Maidstone from the south of the borough. My group and I still believe in trying to secure the relief road. You don't get off the wheel of the local plan of housing. We have to give our borough some infrastructure that we actually need to go alongside housing. I look back at some of the previous full council recordings where you consistently outlined that your main priority was to listen. Quite often my team find ourselves shouting. An example of such was when we called the Maidstone House decarbonisation project into overview and scrutiny, a project at a 1.9% internal rate of return that now seems to have been mysteriously canned, downscaled, even though it was referred to at the time by the leader as a no-brainer. Clearly, we are continually being ignored. So to conclude, we look forward to the Year 1 plan, 2025-26. Maybe this year was spent winging it. Some things we're on board with, the opening of the housing revenue account, the further work at the museum, finally spending the money that we secured on improving the town centre lighting. Some things are secretive, and surely now's the time to reveal. Where do you intend to site your administration's planned council-owned Gypsy and Traveller site? Finally, some things are still extremely vague. What on earth is meant by developing a strategy to champion and deliver increased access to further higher and lifelong learning in the borough? Well, we are where we are, and we won't be where we won't be soon. Unitaries will loom large.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor English, leader of the Liberal Democrat.
I wasn't going to say anything because we've got a budget meeting and it's a long evening. However, having listened to that farrago of misrepresentation and distortion from the leader of the Conservative group, I feel I ought to say something. Let's be clear, the reason there isn't a Leeds-Langley bypass now is because the County Council could not agree on the route when it went out for public consultation many years ago, and the residents of Leeds and Langley were happy for a bypass provided it went through the other village. This is a common problem. I'm not going to be lectured on the non-delivery of highway infrastructure by a county council that has consistently failed to spend money that has already been allocated by this planning authority. Those who've looked at the county budget will see that most of the money that was set aside has not been spent on what it was supposed to be spent on. Then we have proposals like the abortion of the scheme at the Bearsted roundabout, New Cut, where the original scheme consulted on, agreed and supported by Maidstone Borough Council was changed without consultation even with the county members for the area and ran into a serious financial trouble, which we could have told you would have happened. Please stop trying to pass off the failings of the county administration on this borough. It's not an attractive look. Take responsibility yourselves. Now, in terms of lifelong learning, well, perhaps you should ask Councillor Garland, who was the first person to actually raise that issue quite rightly when he was leader of this council as to what it means. I'm sure he'd explain it to you. In terms of some of the other issues, we did think that the decarbonisation programme was a good idea. But like anyone else, when the facts change, we change our minds. The costs were significantly more than originally anticipated. What do you propose we do when the costs change? We amended our policy and our operational approach to meet the circumstances. Would you have preferred us not to? Just so that we could say, oh, we've been completely consistent and we haven't changed our minds. What is one of the problems with Western democratic political leaders is that when facts change, they are unwilling to admit that we need to change course. If more people admitted that circumstances have changed and we have to do something different, I'm sure that society would be a lot better off for it. So, yes, we have a corporate plan. It was delivered on roughly the same schedule as previous corporate plans. It was no later than corporate plans have been in the past. And I'm sure that it will evolve over time as all plans fail to survive completely after contact with reality. That's the nature of plans. However, I think it's as robust as it could be at the moment. We have an ambitious programme, which hopefully we'll be able to deliver. And yes, we are listening, and in terms of when sensible comments come forward and proposals come forward, we will take those on board. But I do personally resent what you said about waste crime. The fact of the matter is, we have put a significant investment into that section and have appointed recently an admin officer, for example, to actually take on the burden of the backroom work so that all our other officers can concentrate on doing the job. That is already showing very significant results. Now, obviously, it will be some time before that feeds through into public perception. I'm sure you understand there is a bit of a lag, but we have put additional resources into that. It is a priority. I sit on a number of parish councils, as you know, and they keep telling me it is a priority, and it will continue to be so. And you have my personal promise that this will continue to be my personal priority as the portfolio holder in this area. And if you think that anything more I should be doing, I am perfectly willing to listen and take that on board.
Thank you, Councillor English. I call upon Councillor Cleater, the leader of the Labour group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And don't we know when there's an election due? I just wanted to pick up a couple of points, and one that's not been mentioned in your leader's report. The 1,000 affordable homes, which has cross-party support and we want to see. I mean, we're never going to reassure people that Lewisham's going to buy them, but there you go. Can we have an update on progress, please, for the rest of the council? Because I think that's really important, that we really get that message out, that they are local homes, affordable for local families, to reduce our significant temporary accommodation costs, which is always a budget strain, no matter what council you're on. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the violence against women and girls. I think, again, for the public, this has been a good cross-party piece of work. I welcome the offer by Councillor Russell on overview and scrutiny around doing some work and getting some people in on that. And I think that is something that's really important. And the dreadful, dreadful incident at Knockholt just shows, again, that women face violence, coercive, abusive relationships. And I think that is something that is underreported. And again, everyone goes shock horror when something like that happens. But actually, we all know as women the escalation that is faced. The other thing I wanted to touch on, which is slightly off-piece, so I will hope, Mr. Mayor, you will allow me this. Invicta Park Barracks is part of our local plan allocation. The bit I wanted to raise is the increasingly unstable issue of the moment of security around. And when you wake up to see that President Trump has said that Ukraine started the war, it is very scary. Now, I don't know what the MOD is going to do, but we have service families, and I know, because I've been there myself, when Gulf War I, Gulf War II, Afghanistan was on, that families start to worry. Add to that, and again, I was living on Invicta Park Barracks when it was going to close last time, and they were going to stick us in Thetford somewhere, I believe, that we need to offer our support, not only to the Ukrainians that are here, but also to the service families who will be going through a great deal of distress. You couple the outrageous comments on Ukraine with President Trump's idea that you just make a beach resort on Gaza, and you really do worry where the world is coming to. We can't deal with that, but what we can deal with are the people who are in our borough who actually will be greatly, greatly disturbed by all of this. COVID showed us that people's mental well-being suffered. I know the County Council and I know this borough has done massive efforts to support people with their mental well-being, through housing, through all the other things we do. But I do think we need to keep our eye on the ball, because the world is a very unsettled place. It causes economic disruption in terms of inflation, etc., and that will impact on things we're trying to deliver. So whilst we are in an election period, and I know we've all got our story to tell, I think we need to remember we're here also to do the work for the people who elected us. And I did take umbrage from the gentleman from the Heritage Party who was here earlier. Actually, we were elected by the people. If only so many % bothered to vote, that really isn't our problem. That's down to them. But we were elected, all of us, from all parties, by local people to deliver a local service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaver. If I may speak from the chair, I think you made some very profound points, if I may say so. I've spent a large part of my working life in the Balkans, and I know a lot of the issues there, but they're very well made points, and thank you for making them, if I may say so. I'll call upon Councillor Harper, leader of the Independent and Fant and Oakwood group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to support what Maureen said in terms of the international situation we face. I can remember going with work to Afghanistan and now seeing the impact of Donald Trump's withdrawal from Afghanistan, and we just look at the awful situation. Are we going to face that, you know, in Gaza and Ukraine and elsewhere? It's too scary to think about, to be honest. I feel we're now back in the Cold War, which was going on when I was a youngster, but let's just, you know, try to find positives in terms of what we do here so that it's not all bad news. Picking up a couple of things. On local government reorganisation, I think it's a real shame that this current national government's pushing ahead, not to improve democracy with it, but to actually save money. The rationale is that district councils which serve well their local communities, such as us, and represent populations typically sort of 100,000, in our case 170, but you go to Rutland, 41,000, are actually quite close to their residents and can engage well with residents generally. Moving up to councils of 500,000 plus, I suspect that will not be the case. I mean, I myself, as some of you know, used to be for 16 years a councillor on a unitary on London Borough of Merton. And even there, although we were effectively a London Borough of a unitary, our population was 200,000. So similar, not so dissimilar to here. So you were still fairly close to your electorate. But £500,000 is just, 500,000 people is just ridiculous in my view. I agree with the idea that we need to look to parish Maidstone Town. We had a good discussion recently, and I've had lots of discussions with Stuart over this. I think you've got a number of options, which I'm sure we'll look through, whether you base it on wards, 3 town councils, north, south and west, or 1 for the whole of Maidstone. But that's going to be work, I imagine, for after the local elections. On HMOs, which the leader mentioned, everybody here knows how passionate I've been over a long period of time for my own ward in Fant. And only last week, in this chamber, we had 2 big planning applications at which a lot of residents came to support Kim, or Kimmy and I actually supported the local residents with Patrick. We get back from that exhausted after going through that. And the next day, on the council's weekly planning list, I go through it and I find there's 3 more HMOs in Fant. 3 more. 2 of which are 6 bedrooms, so they will go through a permitted development right with no democratic input, and 1 which is a conversion of a shop into a 5-bedroom HMO, which will need planning. But it just shows, as I said before, it's relentless for the residents of Fant. Like, you know, in the course of a month, potentially 5 HMOs will have come up, and that's if no more come up in this week's planning list. And I do welcome, and I've been involved with Stuart, again, in terms of looking at the forthcoming HMO policy. I think it should really help us on the ones over 6 bedrooms, applying some of the criteria there, which will be a relief for people in my ward in particular. But I do think we've really got to think about what do we do for these small ones, which sort of go under the radar because they're up to 6 bedrooms, and it's the volume of those which are causing the issues in the Fant area. I just wanted to mention, I'm glad we've got the corporate strategy coming up. I've got a couple of words to say on that later. But I think everybody will give us something to focus on in terms of moving forward. And just finally, on affordable homes, obviously I've got a proposal on that tonight, but the quicker we can get 1,000 or more in place will be perfect for our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. I will now open this meeting up, but we've done very well on time, I think. So I'll open the meeting up to questions from council members for a period, for 15 minutes. Questions may be on any subject relevant to the role of the leader. So does anybody wish to raise?
Councillor Mr. Sims, Councillor Thompson.
Okay. Yeah.
No, just Tom.
Councillor Tom Sams.
Thank you. Firstly, I appreciate the time constraints this evening, so I'll be brief. Leader, I note from your comments on the progress of SPDs. From the initial meeting, we were told that the Chinese wall, can we please in future, this council call it an ethical wall, this will be maintained between the two sides of the council. At the SPD meeting, an officer acting with Homes England as co-promoter and another officer acting from the planning side. This ethical barrier needs clear separation. This needs to be transparent. So my question is there a protocol for this arrangement? Can you share it? How is this being managed so that all can have the confidence that this ethical wall or separation is clearly defined and understood by everyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. I believe there is a protocol. I will find it and I will read it. It's news to me, but I'm told there is one. And yes, it will be maintained.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just ask a question which, as I was only elected last year, I may, or I should maybe know the answer to, but if you could clarify it. The previous leader of the council announced a target of 1,000 affordable homes. Two parts. Is that in addition to the affordable quota developers are obliged to deliver? And secondly, who will manage these 1,000 affordable homes? Will it be Maidstone Borough, or will we outsource that to a housing association?
Does anybody wish to answer that? Is there an answer? I'm not sure.
Councillor Jeffries is supposed to answer it.
But some of those I will have to confirm on in terms of the actual. Sometimes I might have to come back and absolutely confirm some of those bits. Well, in terms of the ongoing management, clearly they are Maidstone Borough Council homes. I think we've got a management company that does aspects of it. But I can get those details for you. We're obviously in early days on this. And just in terms of coming back, because I know Councillor Cleaser asked a similar question about the numbers and so forth, I think it's probably wise to get a bit of a briefing note to you on some of the progress and so forth, so we can come back on those.
Ask a supplementary.
Oh, you want to come back?
Could you? Quite frankly, I'm amazed that. But can I ask that you circulate to all members the answers to that? What I thought was a relatively simple question.
There are a number of questions, and I'm happy to circulate answers to all of them.
Okay, Councillor Barwick, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I ask, when there's a lot of discussions going on in back rooms about devolution and the number of authorities that need to be set up. When is the council, this council, going to get an opportunity to discuss what we want to put forward on the number of unity authorities going forward?
Thank you. We conducted an all-member briefing last month, I think, where we had discussions around that. I'm meeting with leaders every 2 weeks, I think, at the moment. I'm passing all of the information on to each of the leaders, and I'm hoping that they are feeding back to you. I get feedback in return from each of the leaders, which helps inform my questions and what I put forward to the wider Kent Leaders Group. As I've mentioned, we are planning to put the 21st of March submission as best we can through our own governance arrangements in terms of PAC and Cabinet. That is going to be very fast because I doubt we'll get to see it much before the 19th, if I'm honest. So we're going to have to move very fast. But at some point, we'll obviously continue to do full member briefings as and when substantial changes happen.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Cannon?
Thank you. The leader mentioned that the discussion around the town council. I just wanted to know, do you support a precept on town centre residents in Allington and elsewhere to fund that council? And will there be a democratic process, perhaps a referendum, to see if residents want to actually pay that precept?
I mean, the community governance review process is set out and it will be followed. And generally speaking, there's some sort of precept for parish councils, town councils. But there is the process is per the law and per our, and we're following it.
Are there any further questions? I don't see any. Do you see? Okay. Well, thank you, members. Sorry, I'm having fun with the microphone at the moment. Agenda item 14, I call upon Councillor Russell to present, I think it's a report on scrutiny, overview and scrutiny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, starting on page 14 of your agenda pack tonight, I'd like to present the annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This year, the committee's reviewed one call-in request, carried out pre-decision scrutiny on 8 decisions and completed 1 review, which was into infrastructure provision, section 106 in SIL. We've reviewed the work programme regularly, and we'd really like to thank all of the officers and cabinet members that have attended the meetings this year to assist in our work, especially also the third-party members that have come from other infrastructure providers to help with our reviews. And my deepest thanks goes to all of our committee members for the efforts overall in the work, and also in those that have done the working group as we did our review. So thank you, everyone, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Needs to be said. Sorry. Yeah. The report, Councillor Russell, the report does need to be seconded.
Oh,
Someone's put their hand up.
Councillor Cook seconded.
Councillor Cook? Okay. Okay. Are there any, does anybody want to comment? No? Can we agree it? Lovely jubbly. Thank you very much. Let's move on then. Okay, I call upon Councillor Round to move the recommendation of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, which is held on the 13th of January.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand in tonight, obviously, for the absent Chair and Vice Chair. Over the process of the last year, Audit Governance and Standards Committee have gone through the process of finding an independent member of the Audit Governance and Standards Committee. Having gone through a very resourceful process, you will see the report as per item 15 on page 21. I therefore wish to propose the recommendation of committee.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Is that seconded, please?
Ziggy Zabrzynski.
Councillor English? Yeah, oh, yours. Okay, that's fine. Can we agree that? Great, thank you. Let's move on. Okay. I call upon Councillor Janetta Sams to move the recommendation of the Employment Committee. Pay Policy Statement 2025. The recommendations on page 23. Councillor Sams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I move that the proposed pay policy statement 2025 set out as Appendix 1 to this report be approved? Thank you.
Could I have a seconder for that recommendation?
Councillor Jones.
Councillor Jones. Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Is that agreed? Oh, golly, someone wants to speak. Sorry, Councillor Barwick, I didn't see you then. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of questions on the chart on page. Oh, why do you never? You lose it when you want it. I think it's on page 34. This doesn't take into account the minimum wage, which is going up to £12.21 in April, 1st of April. Also, there's 2 grades no longer in use. Those people on those grades, were they put into grade 3? And is there then a compression of grades, probably due to the minimum wage going up over the last couple of years? And also, is pay point 3 a spot point? And will the minimum wage rise mean that also pay point 4 will become a spot point, because that will, the rise of the minimum wage will have an impact right down to pay point 5?
Councillor Sams, do you want to answer that, or would you like the Chief Executive?
Thank you. Can I ask the Chief Executive to answer those questions? Because I know that many of those questions were asked at the meeting and covered by the officer. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I hope I've picked up all the elements of your question. Firstly, you referred to the national living wage. The table that you're referring to are the salary scales for the current year. So our salary scales for, which do meet the national living wage, in fact, are slightly ahead of that. And that will continue into 2025-26. You're absolutely right to say that scales 1 and 2 are no longer in use, and in fact they haven't been in use for quite some time now, and the reason for that, you are correct in saying, is that the national living wage means that we can't use them anymore, and each time that happens we need to adjust the points on the scales above, and we will need to do the same for 2025-2026. So there is nobody has a post that is on scale 1 or 2. It wouldn't make sense. So I hope that covers your points, and if you have more detailed points at any other point, then I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you. Have I missed something? Sorry.
Yes, because I asked about compression of grades, because those people, you're saying 1 and 2 and there's no one on there, but where did those people go that were on those grades? Or did you because if you're just moving the pay point, there's no need to get rid of the point 1 and 2. They would stay there. It's just the wages would go up to match them. But if you've moved them, then that's a compression, and they've gone on to a different grade, and their job descriptions. I can speak to you about it afterwards, but it's compression of grades where the job descriptions are several.
So I think this is too detailed to
Yeah.
answer now, but what I can tell you is that things have been handled entirely appropriately, and the posts are now parts of grade 3, and we've made adjustments so that the compression that I think you're concerned about is mitigated.
Okay.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Sams, as well? So.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Okay, members, can we agree this? Agree. Thank you very much. Thank you. Agenda item 17, then, I'll call upon Councillor Harwood to move the recommendation of the Cabinet, Cabinet Maidstone, I've got the thing wrong. Maidstone Local Development Scheme update. It's a Cabinet recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just guide colleagues to a very brief report on pages 53 and 54? And it just sets out the fact that under the provisions of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, all local planning authorities in England are required to maintain an up-to-date local development scheme. And the local development scheme, it just sets out our spatial plans going forward. MHCLG, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, wrote to us recently, and all other English local planning authorities, asking for local development schemes to be updated by the 6th of March, and hence we revisited this issue. There are a few changes within the document, which some of them forced by local government review, and I think, for example, we're looking more at supplementary planning documents rather than local development plan documents, which take much longer. Hence, we have two recommendations. One is that officers undertake the required measures to facilitate the formal withdrawal of the Design and Sustainability Development Plan document, and that's going to be picked up by a number of SPDs. And two, that the Local Development Scheme 2025-27, which is attached to Appendix 1 of the report, is adopted in order that it may be submitted to MHCLG by 6th of March 2025 deadline. I therefore move. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey, I think you're seconding this, aren't you? Right. Does anybody wish to comment? If not, can we agree it? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. Okay, agenda item 18. I call upon Councillor Jeffrey to move the recommendation of the Cabinet on Corporate Strategy 2025 to 2035. The recommendations on page 73.
Thank you. Back in July last year, I described the supertanker and how we needed to turn it around. Over the past few months, I think we've just done just that. The ship is now facing in a new direction, and this new corporate strategy is the course we have charted, and we're now ready to set sail. The new corporate strategy supports our policy development, and it forms the basis of our year one actions and our budget. It now has a schoolboy written forward as well, which I take slight umbrage with, but hey, never mind. Our mission is to put people and the environment first. This underpins our work, and in a rapidly changing and an increasingly dangerous world, as Councillor Cleese pointed out, the need to put people and the environment at the heart of our actions has never been more necessary. We have four priorities: a high-quality place adapted for a changing climate. Climate change is the greatest threat to humanity that we face. We need strong concerted actions that adapt our borough to be able to cope with the coming storms and heat waves. We need to improve the resilience, whether it's improving energy security through better insulated homes or providing lower carbon alternatives to car travel. It includes improving natural spaces, establishing a nature recovery fund to increase biodiversity, and a revised climate strategy, an active transport strategy, action on air pollution and protection of assets. The second priority is resilient communities. Strong and thriving communities are essential. But to do that, we really need to listen to those underrepresented and unheard people so that we can meet their needs. We will be inclusive. We want residents to have a sense of pride. We want to help improve people's health, young people to have safe places to hang out, strong action to stop violence against women and girls, and we want to work with and strengthen voluntary groups. Our third priority, quality homes for all, a safe, warm home, is the basis of a resilient community. What could be more important? We are focusing on affordable and social housing, and we are going faster and farther than ever before. We will reduce waiting times on the housing list. We will provide a council-owned gypsy and traveller site, and we will improve the quality of homes in all sectors. And finally, we want a fairer economy for people and planet, meeting the needs of people while improving the environment. That is a tough challenge. We will encourage a move from the take and throw away society towards a circular economy where resources are reused, waste is minimised, and the environment is regenerated. We will be using, for example, Jubilee Square as our marketplace. We will deliver a creative space in the town, and we will have a clear vision for the town centre. And while the priorities are important, how we do things is even more essential. Making sure that we involve members early in policy discussions. And Councillor Russell, I know you may have been shouting, but on Monday night we involved members on our climate change policy. There was none of your team there, so you may have been shouting, but we need to be able to hear you. You need to be in the room, please come along. We want to be evidence-based. We want to show strong local leadership. We need to ensure the rights of people and planet are heard, and engaging with the public at depth not seen before is how we will do things. So year one of our strategy is the action plan that you've got alongside this, sets out what we intend to do this coming year, and it forms the basis of our budget. As I said in the packs and highlighted earlier, we are in uncertain and uncharted waters, so we may need to change tack if and when devolution, local government, ruralisation, and anything else that goes on requires it. So I do hope you can get behind this and work collegiately to deliver what our borough needs for the future. So I move the corporate strategy and year one action plan. I think it's page 73, and I move that it be approved.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Is that seconded? Do you have a second? I see several hands go up. Councillor Thompson, I think your hand stayed up the longest. Okay, all right. Councillor Russell, I think I saw your hand raised.
Quite a few other hands too.
Okay.
Thank you. On Monday night, I mean, there's not much that's more important than this council, but it was my son's 16th birthday, so that's why I wasn't there. Normally I am one of the few that attend these things. Every new administration will write a new corporate strategy. This is normal practice. I find myself reading through this one with an overwhelming sense of how and what. Lots of different ideas, all centring on the concept of donut economics, which in a year I've mostly heard the leader describe as donut economics. I sort of get it, but how does it embed itself within policy decision-making at this council? Surely there should be a way to weigh up decisions that can be audited and looked at to see which area that decision's pulling in. Could this not have formed part of the corporate strategy, i.e. how do decisions get made, and how is the weighting scored and balanced and recorded in an open and transparent manner? What are some of the sentences actually saying? There seems to be a distinct lack of measurables and numerical targets, perhaps an excellent strategy, as who on earth could hold this up to check delivery on outcomes? The overall feeling that I'm left with, unfortunately, is that of a word salad. Some bits you like, some bits you can tolerate. Who on earth put anchovies in there? And like with all salads, I find I'd rather have a steak. As such, I can't vote for this strategy.
Right. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Dawes, please.
I like your corporate strategy, but I have something is my residents have been complaining about missed bins, collections since the start of the year. We know the contract have been going wrong for a while, and we was promised in February to have a bit of a what's been happening wrong for the contract changes, and I don't see any of it in the corporate strategy or in any response to the council on ongoing issues with bin in rural villages. Thank you.
Councillor Harper, I think.
Councillor Harper's point.
Sorry? Yeah.
Councillor Harper's questions next.
Councillor Harper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that I've obviously supported previous strategic plans, and I think there's a lot in this new corporate plan that I and my two groups like. I mean, obviously, we've put forward some budget amendments this evening, so clearly we would like to see some tweaking. But our view is that we want to work with the administration. We wish to help you make better decisions as we look through things, and we will always engage in a constructive way in terms of trying to put forward perhaps suggestions how things may be done a bit differently or how we can achieve the objectives. But there is a lot in it. I think our group really welcome, and I personally fully support the idea of the quality homes. I think it's essential people have a decent roof over their head. And having been a member of Friends of the Earth when I was around 16 or so, supporting the environment and pushing the environment to the fore, I think is really important, because quality homes are essential for everyone to live in, but a quality environment is also essential to people's well-being, as well as obviously nature and the environment. So that's really all I'd like to say at this stage.
Councillor English. Councillor English.
A corporate plan is not an action plan. It is a set of aspirations setting out the council's vision. And I was told that by Councillor Garland, a previous leader of this council and a friend of mine, some time ago when I asked very much similar question as was asked earlier. We are, as a council, as a cabinet, bringing forward a lot of implementation strategies, and you will probably be sick to the teeth of the level of detail and information that you will be receiving over the next few months. Turning specifically to the bin issue, I'm quite happy, and I have been working through issues as identified by parish councils and individual ward councillors, and I continue to do so. And I'm quite happy to sit down with Baltimore Chelsea Parish Council and ward member to work through any remaining issues. The vast majority of which we have at the moment are being caused by communal management companies, and I have several of those in my own ward which are posing problems. The council is taking enforcement action where necessary with some of those, but I obviously can't mention which ones because it's enforcement action. I would say that in general, across the piece, our figures compare favourably now with BIFAs. They're actually better than we were experiencing under the previous contract. That doesn't mean there are pockets like yours, and also I'm aware of pockets in Headcorn and Oldcombe which still require attention. And I'm quite happy to pursue those with the ward members in question and parish councils in detail, should they wish me to do so.
Thank you, Councillor English. Does anybody else wish to speak to the floor? Councillor Gooch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Chairman. Very briefly, this corporate strategy for me is a bit of a curate's egg. Some of it, I'm right behind it. Other parts, I think you must be joking. This is idealism gone mad. I read the words Poverty Truth Commission, and my first thought was 1984. But however, it is a corporate strategy, And I think we should be here to be constructive and positive and help us all move forward. I don't think residents will ever be in charge. Unfortunately, the system we have is that the government is in charge, and that we just need, I was nearly going to say we need some decent MPs, but I really must not do that, so I won't say it. So, however, albeit a curate's egg, I will support it, albeit that I will be challenging something when we come to the budget. But I thought I ought to come clean and say, look, nevertheless, I'll see this through. We've got to have something. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Good. Councillor Cleater, I think you want to.
Yeah, thank you. Corporate strategies, there's a lot in it. I agree with. There's some I'm like, But at the end of the day, we need to have some sort of plan to work to. If we don't like stuff, we pull it into overview and scrutiny. And when I worked for KCC, I didn't see anything in their corporate strategy that says let's decimate adult social care. But there you go. So we will be voting for it. Can we, if we can get on with the vote, that would be lovely.
Yeah. Councillor Thompson, I think you seconded it at any rate, so do you want to, you would like to reply, I'm sure. No? Okay. Councillor Jeffrey, I'm sure. To wrap it all up, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank members for constructive comments. They're very helpful. And I wish to congratulate Councillor Russell's son on his 16th birthday. And I hope we move to the vote and pass this strategy.
Okay. Well, I think because of what members have said, I'm going to move this to an actual vote, if that's okay. So those for it, can you put your hands up, please? We've got the number. Okay. Those against? Okay. Okay. Abstentions? Okay. So the vote is obviously carried. Do we know the numbers? There are ours? 10 to 2. Okay.
I'm not sure anybody else could hear.
No. That's, I think that's fine. That's fine. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. So we can move on now to agenda item 19. This is probably the one that's going to be the big one, I suspect. So, can I call on Councillor Jeffrey to move the recommendations of the Cabinet in relation to the medium-term financial plan strategy and the budget proposals for 2025-26. And I would remind members that as a consequence of the local authorities' standing orders, and I'm not going to read the whole lot out, but we have to have a name vote on this one and on all the amendments that go with it. I'm afraid it is a statutory requirement, so we have to go through a bit. But Councillor Jeffrey, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is actually with great delight that I present this budget and medium-term financial strategy. We've just agreed the corporate strategy and the year one action plan upon which this budget is based. We now need to agree the budget itself. The proposals before you deliver a balanced budget for 25-26. It's been necessary to increase council tax, the council's principal source of income, by, I assume it's 2.99%, 3% rounded up, in common with most other English districts. Mason's share of council tax for 25-26 will be £301.68 out of a total of £2,357.88 using band D as the base case. Car parking has been frozen for the past few years, i.e. this council has been subsidising car drivers at the expense of other services. That position needs to end, and we've begun to catch up with inflation on off-street parking charges. A 15% increase is in the budget against the 25% inflation since the charges were last increased. This reinforces the principle that those who use discretionary services should pay sufficient towards their running costs. Overnight parking charges have been reduced to allow town centre residents to park off-street rather than on-street, a need that was supported by the residents' survey. I'm particularly pleased to note the 500,000 of the unring-fenced government grants be transferred to the Nature Recovery Fund. This is supported by the High Quality Place Adapted for the Future priority, and that was the highest scoring priority for residents. Connected with this, the budget retains funding towards achieving net zero by 2030. And I'm pleased that the budget includes funding for the citizens' assemblies, starting with work to tackle violence against women and girls, which was highlighted as a priority for this council. This will help us formulate acceptable policy to reduce that violence. It will provide insights into areas that we hadn't considered, and it will ensure that our policy is focused on the right issues. Citizens' assemblies work will look at building. We'll also look at building a travel strategy for the borough, something that is clearly important given the earlier questions. £100,000 has been transferred to a devolution local government reorganisation fund to support ongoing Kent-wide work. We are being forced down this line, so we want to make sure that we are able to influence the outcome properly for the benefit of our residents. And that's the flavour of the revenue budget. The capital budget, 258 million over 5 years. There's the Quality Homes for Life in there, with at least 100,000, with at least 1,000 being aimed for over the next 10 years. Gosh. There is spending on temporary accommodation, which will be gradually replaced by the increase in available social and affordable housing. We have reduction of carbon on the council's property estate, that's £8 million. Further corporate acquisitions supporting the council house building programme to generate income revenue over the coming years. And obviously, as we've said, the development of a council-owned and provided Gypsy Traveller and Travelling Show People site over the next 3 years, which was also supported by a consultation. The subsidy required for social and affordable housing is supported by transferring 3.3 million of the unring-fenced government grants to the Housing Investment Fund. And the capital programme recognises a need to plan for the renewal of leisure facilities at the end of the current contract in the final 3 years of the 5-year programme. The Director of Finance statement of robustness and adequacy of reserves confirms that the Council has adequate but not excessive levels of reserves. And clearly the budget proposals are based on the present two-tier structure, and this will remain in place for this coming year. We obviously await the timetable for reorganisation, and we may need to flex plans as and when it is provided. I move the recommendations on pages 146 to 148.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor, is that Councillor? English, sorry, I can see. Do you wish to speak now, Councillor English, or hold your right, reserve your right?
I reserve my right.
Thank you, thank you. I just wanted to remind members that there are 4 amendments to the budget this evening, and they are included in a budget amendments pack with an index for ease of reference. The pack has been circulated, and briefing notes are included in the pack with schedules detailing the impact of each amendment on the proposed budget figures. Now, before I give the figure to the first amendment, I think, Councillor Cleater, you had a question on process or procedure.
Yeah, just a quick question, and obviously I'm sure Maidstone Borough does this differently than trade unions do. But Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 want to spend the same money, but on different things. So my question is, when we have the debate, if Amendment 1 is passed, then Amendment 2 obviously would fall. How are we going to debate it?
Do you want to give an explanation on that?
My only question is, I understand the other amendments, but these amendments are both spending the same money on different things.
It becomes the substantive amendment.
Yeah, so if I might explain. If the first amendment is approved, it then becomes part of the substantive. The second amendment can then be considered. So that's the way in which local government procedure works.
Is that right? Okay. All right. Okay. Let's move on. So I look to Councillor Russell to move an amendment after. So I call upon Councillor Russell. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In budgeting, it's all about choices. As we know, the pot to choose from is only so big. There are ways that it can be grown by increasing council tax, a growing population, or by putting up prices. There are ways that money can be saved, not introducing growth items into the budget, for example, or by making savings within the current budget. When making these choices, parking is always looked at as an easy win cash cow. When in administration, we too were asked to raise parking charges. We didn't do it. It sounds simple, doesn't it? What could possibly go wrong? However, it is this kind of incremental creep of parking charges that will do a lot to ruin our town centre and impact the remaining businesses that we have located here. I was in the hairdresser the other week, not that you can tell, and not one, not two, but 3 different customers all came in and mentioned parking charges. One was concerned about how long their appointment would be to see if it would go into the next time slot. One mentioned they hadn't been to town for a while and it was because of the parking charges. Third one I couldn't hear because of the hairdryer. Now, whilst I realise this is a snapshot of views and hardly representative, it's important to realise that any raising of parking charges impacts our residents and our businesses. If we were to undertake an equalities impact assessment, I have no doubt that we would find rural residents impacted the most. For how else are they supposed to get to the town centre other than by car? The lesser spotted number 5 is a rare species in the villages south of the borough, and only the most committed of cyclists would consider a jaunt into town up Linton Hill or down Boxley Hill. We've tabled our amendment to keep car parking charges in town as they are, included in Moat Park, same as the current rate, to continue to value our town businesses and make sure that people can cheaply access the outdoors. In order to find this money, we propose a reversal of some of your other choices. Now is not the time to embark on an integrated transport strategy as we hurtle headlong into the world of local government reorganisation. The money spent on an annual parish council meeting is not needed. Time would be better spent by a borough representative always attending the count meetings. We'd like to remove the proposal for the £55,000 dedicated project management resource growth item. There was plenty of resource in the team before, and given that we rely on partners to deliver a lot of any action plan that we sign up to, it's not felt that a permanent staff increase in this area is needed, especially when there's already the extra £500,000 one-off revenue contribution that you have put towards this work. The final removal that we've proposed is the £100,000 annual revenue amount for the Citizens Engagement Panel. I've heard a comment recently about overview and scrutiny not doing enough. To my mind, that's because there's not been much work forthcoming in the last year to scrutinise, but that aside, why don't topics that we'd like to dig into as a council get to overview and scrutiny? It's a great forum for debate, for getting expert witnesses, for producing reports. Residents could have an advance notice of topics in order to contribute. My group questioned why we need a whole other new forum, and I don't know about any of you, but we might as well make ourselves redundant now. We were elected to represent the views of our residents. They elected us to do so last time, and I'm sure if they don't like us next time, they'll remove us. A different option would be just to have the Citizens' Assembly and get rid of us totally. Fine by me. Daytime meetings, however well enumerated, cannot possibly attract working people. There's no way, for example, that I could take the whole day off to go to a citizens' panel unless I took annual leave. And with the best will in the world, I would not be doing that just to give my views to the council. The deletions that I've mentioned above save £53,000 over and above our car parking proposals, and we propose allocating this to the Housing Investment Fund. This council has consistently demonstrated cross-party commitment to delivering a social and affordable housing programme, which, by the way, was for Maidstone residents and was designed because at the time our housing list was 880, hence where the 1,000 affordable houses come from. They would be managed by Maidstone, and we would set up a housing revenue account to do the maintenance on these properties. It's essential that we prioritise and accelerate this work before any transition to a unitary authority is made. Your administration has removed our reference to the 1,000 affordable houses we set as a target. You say you aim for higher, but no number is now mentioned. This work must remain at the forefront of our ambition to deliver for our Maidstone residents, and our further allocation here will go some way towards achieving our aims more quickly. So our amendment reflects our choices. We value our town centre and its businesses and the people that come to Maidstone to visit or work. Penalising them seems unfair and counterproductive to the vibrant town centre offering that we're trying to create.
Do you have a seconder for this? I think it's Councillor Parfitt. Yeah, thank you. Right. I do have some speakers. Have you all had a chance to look at the amendments? I assume you have, and you had them in the pack, so it's important we understand what's going on. Okay. First, I think Councillor Sweetman, then Councillor English. I'll do it in that order. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. At the last full council meeting, councillors supported Councillor Jenkins Baldock's motion to address violence against women and young girls. Today, the council are asking to make amendments to the proposed budget, including cutting monies allocated for the Citizens' Assembly. This will have an effect on the vulnerable females of our borough. Violence against women and girls is a major concern. Why is this no longer important to you? Thank you.
Councillor English.
Right. Where do you start with this amendment, to be honest? Right. We've been told what is absent from the consideration of the parking strategy in this amendment is town centre residents. One of the parking charges changes were very carefully considered. Amongst the changes, reading this amendment, you'd think we'd put them all up. Amongst those changes were proposals to dramatically reduce the season ticket for nighttime parking for residents in the town centre. If we're going to have housing in the town centre, we need to ensure that residents are able to park there. Otherwise, many of these people will not be able to work, and they will have to choose between a job and somewhere to live. I think if you are going to change this, you really do need to reconsider how you've drafted this, because it screws over town centre residents as presented. In terms of the charges in relation to businesses, there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the strategy adopted has any impact on how many people visit the town centre or not. There is no evidence whatsoever that our parking charges, if they were increased to the same level, which they're not, by the way, they would still be less than some of the town centre shopping centres, would have the effect that's suggested. Moving on, I was chairman of the Calc Area Committee for 10 years and then secretary afterwards. We had an annual parish conference throughout that period, and it had been going for many, many years. Every year it was hosted alternately by the borough and then by Calc. It was a very effective operation for smoothing out relationships and addressing some misconceptions. It ceased to operate because the ego of a cabinet member who thought he wanted to centralise all communication with parishes through himself. I won't embarrass the person by saying who it was, but that was a very retrospective step, and bringing that back would be a good move. In terms of citizen engagement, I went to Lancaster University. Lancaster City Council is the greenest council in the country, a notable success story. That work has been based on citizens' assemblies. That can work. We want to hear new ideas. And in terms of integrated transport strategy, you've been telling us all evening we need to get on with transport strategy, and you now don't want an integrated transport strategy. Could you please, on the Conservative benches, make up your mind whether you want the Borough Council to move forward with dealing with these transport issues or you don't? If you don't, fine, but don't try and have it both ways. And in terms, finally, of nature recovery, the Victorians knew you can't just build houses, you need to build a robust, holistic environment. And that's what that's about. If you just build houses, you get slums.
That's it. I think he's very good at that sort of thing. Councillor Millen, was that? Yeah, Millen. Councillor Millen?
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. You'll see why I'm emotional when I get towards the end of this. The previous Conservative administration used taxpayers' funds to subsidise parking charges between 2021 and 2025, which had no benefit for residents who did not drive or use these car parks. Why did Conservative target non-drivers, users of public transport and children not being driven around in cars by not freezing the costs of public transport? By doing so, preventing these people who want to get outdoors, enjoy nature, entertain the children and get exercise. These activities should not become more costly for those who don't drive, whilst drivers, be they residents or visitors, are subsidised by those who cannot, or even choose not to, use motor cars. Private car parks like Fremlin Walk have always charged way more than what this increase will be. And it is not only busy, but often full. I think it is right that we, the Green and Independent Alliance, Lib Dem coalition, correct such a biased use of money. I think if we want to use residents' money to subsidise something that brings people into the town and to Moat Park, we should be looking at our buses and even bringing back our park and ride, so everyone can get to Moat Park without using a car, whether they are fortunate enough to have one or not. As an example, me and my kids, to enjoy Moat Park, it costs us £14.50 to catch the 2 buses each way. It's actually better for us to get taxis there and back for 60p more and saves us 30 minutes in travel time. For users of Moat Park car park, it's £3 for up to 6 hours, and it's free before 10 AM. A single bus ticket is £3. And if our elderly and disabled cannot use their free passes, they cannot use their free passes before 9:30 AM. To suggest car parking prices should continue to be subsidised for the few at the cost of us all is, to use your words, elitist. And frankly, to suggest this 5 days after a woman was shot dead by her husband yards away from the bus stop I used to use almost every day when I lived in Knockholt, I actually spent a lot of Saturday scared to hear if it was one of my old classmates when all we knew was that she was my age. It's a small village. So for you to have the nerve to say that money should be taken away from tackling the national emergency of violence against women and girls to subsidise parking, it's actually offensive.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Councillor Cook, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think nobody in this chamber on either side is ever going to take the subject of violence against women and girls anything other than very seriously. And to suggest other than that is actually inappropriate. It's not a question of whether one cares about that as a subject. The issue is how we go about addressing it, and whether a citizens' assembly is the correct way. Will the citizens' assembly in Maidstone put to right the ills that we are seeing, such as the incident in Knockholt? Sadly not. Sadly not. It will be another form of talking shop. But there is another way that we can do it, and this that can be done, and can be done within our existing infrastructure without the use of this money. And that is by creating select committees under the auspices of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that actually then delve down and do a deep dive on these subjects, bring in witnesses, bring in people from outside, and bring in expert witnesses. So we can actually come up with proper suggestions and do that in a proper way. So I reject the suggestion that we are taking that type of view to that. Now, there's been a bit of finger pointing this evening, Mr. Mayor, as I'm sure you've been aware, and it's been suggested that, well, you know, we're talking about the Leeds Lane Relief Road. Don't we over here know that KCC is the Highways Authority? Well, yes, of course it is. I think we all know that KCC is the Highways Authority. So why do we need to spend money on an integrated transport strategy when actually we're all going to be coming together in a matter of a couple of years anyway, and it's going to take time to develop any arguments for a relief road. So whilst we will continue to support the idea of a relief road, and there are things that the borough can do in terms of developing the data that actually supports what type of roads are needed where. And I think that is not what's encompassed within the integrated transport strategy that's within this. So I'm running out of time, Mr. Mayor, but that's why I think we support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. No more speakers. Councillor Parfitt, you were seconded, didn't you? So.
Councillor Cox has just stuck up there.
Oh, someone says, Councillor. I'll give you first floor, Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Residential engagement on active travel, and also investigating town centre and rural areas and bespoke residents parking in the town centres and streets, and particularly like new variation. So we're looking to see what we can do that's within our control that can make things bigger and easier. And I need three residents to leave into account.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. No, there are no more speakers. I'd like to invite Councillor Parfitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I think it's important to say that actually
caring about violence against women and girls and wanting to keep parking charges low are not mutually exclusive. And to suggest that we don't care about it is quite offensive if we're going down that route. So budgets are about choices, tough choices. And when resources are limited, we have to ask ourselves, what do we value most? We often hear that raising parking charges is an easy win, a simple way to bring in more revenue. But what's easy on paper isn't always smart in practice. Parking charges aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, they affect real people, our residents, our businesses, and the future of our town centre. Over the years, we've seen a slow but steady rise in these charges, and we are now at the point when they are actively discouraging people from coming into Maidstone. That's not a theory, it's what people are telling us. Time and again, we hear residents say they avoid the town because parking is too expensive. We've seen the impact of shifting shopping habits, and if we keep pushing up parking costs, we will only accelerate the decline of our high street. And let's be honest, who will be hit hardest by these increases? It's not those that live in the town centre, it's our rural residents, those who don't have the luxury of frequent bus routes or easy public transport links. For many, the car isn't a choice, it's a necessity. Pricing them out of Maidstone only deepens the divide between urban and rural communities, making essential services and social activities less accessible. That's why we are proposing an alternative budget amendment, one that protects our town centre, supports local businesses and ensures everyone has affordable access to public spaces like Moat Park. Our alternative proposal doesn't just freeze parking charges, it actually generates an additional £53,000 in savings. And we don't want to just sit on that money. We believe it should be reinvested into the Housing Investment Fund because there is nothing more fundamental to people's lives than having a safe, affordable home. The Council has always been committed to affordable housing, yet we have now seen the removal of the 1,000 affordable home target without any clear replacement. We are told the ambition is even greater, but with no firm target, no timeline and no guarantees, that is not a plan, it is a wish. By prioritising housing investment, we ensure this vital work continues before we face the uncertainty of a new unitary authority. We can't afford to lose momentum on this issue, and we certainly can't afford to see those funds redirected elsewhere. I urge you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Sorry. I'll invite Councillor Russell to perhaps sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all of your points, some of which were obviously emotively made, and I do take those on board. I'm obviously concerned about violence against women and girls. I just think we have the forum already to look at it, and we actually took that on board at the last overview and scrutiny meeting, and we have added that to the work programme. I know that we have different ways of doing things, but please let's not argue about the subject matter and how much it means to each of us. That is unfair. Yes, you might say that we prioritise car parking charges. I would also say that when we're having the conversation about which council does what, KCC do buses. We never sit here and talk about how much the bus charges go up by. That isn't our remit. When we go to unitary, it may well be, but at the moment it isn't. The only choices we would have would be a brand new bus service of something like that, run by the council, subsidised by the council. Again, it's all about choices. I am concerned about the town centre. We do hear time and time again, Blue Water, it's free. And that is what we're fighting against. We're also fighting and sustaining the businesses we have, the visitors, the visitor economy, all of that, which is integral to what we do in here as Maidstone Borough Council. So I do appreciate all of your points, but I would like now to move to the vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Right, we go for the vote. Okay, to everybody? Right, those support the amendment in favour of the amendment.
Okay, so... No,
yeah, sorry, I better...
Yeah, sorry,
Alison.
if I could just remind people, because this is an amendment to the budget,
yes.
and there is a requirement, a legislative requirement, to take a recorded vote. So I'm going to be asking all of you in turn whether you are for, against, or are abstaining for this amendment. Okay? And then we'll go through the same process for subsequent amendments. So, Councillor Barwick.
Against.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Cannon.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Against.
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 For.
Against. For.
Against.
For.
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 Against.
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 Against. Against.
Against.
Against.
Against.
For.
For.
Against.
For.
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 Against.
Against.
Against. Against. For.
Against.
Okay, so members, the votes for the amendment were 17 and against 26, which means the amendment falls.
Thank you. So on to the next one then. I'd call upon Councillor Harper to move amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said earlier, my group want to engage with the Cabinet in a constructive and positive way. To that end, we have taken advantage to make our views known through the budget process to date, through all the packs. And this budget continues the work of previous councils to actually have a balanced budget and presenting a number of changes. We are largely supportive of the proposed initiatives outlined in the Revenue and Capital Programme, subject obviously to the amendments we are presenting. I think one of the things we need to think about is with local government reorganisation, time is against us now. We need to think about things we can really do and get largely completed or well en route in the next 12 to 18 months. So our first amendment is around street cleaning. This is one of the top priorities for residents, but satisfaction has declined by 13% since 2022 on page 121 of your papers. As a council, we have an opportunity to reverse that, support our amendment to improve street cleaning. Street leaves left over the winter are a hazard, making pavements treacherous for pedestrians, especially the less able. Clearing them could be done just after the major leaf fall in October, November. However, frequently this is not done and leaves are left to rot until cleaned up in January and February. An injection of resources, as we are looking at, would help address this. We are not against the idea behind citizens' engagement assemblies, but as proposed, each citizens' engagement assembly will cost £50,000, of which £44,000 will go to consultants to find citizens and then to plan the event. We've heard earlier that Councillor Cleater is moving to take the issue around violence against women and girls to overview and scrutiny, which will enable the issue to be looked at in detail relatively quickly. Last week, the Council did a press release to set up residents' focus groups to advise the Council on corporate communications. That's all being done internally, finding representative panels, asking people to come forward with a demographic undertaking so that you can identify and get a relatively representative focus groups, and all being done without the need to resort to £40,000 of external consultants. We believe that you can do the ethos of citizens' engagement assemblies without the use of consultants to such an extreme event. So please support this amendment, and I reserve my right to apply under 15(9)(2) of the Constitution.
Councillor Gooch, I think. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the amendment. I reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Does it? Yeah. Councillor Jeffrey.
Lovely. So, yeah, I mean, improving street cleaning sounds great, doesn't it? I must say, the team do a brilliant job in my ward. I link with them every time there's leaves piling up, and even my fellow councillor has worked with them to do some citizens' engagement on getting rid of some of those leaves. That they do a fantastic job. I'd love to put a bit more money in that. It'd be great. But the problem is we're taking it out of the work. We are proposing to take it out of the work we want to do against violence against women, and we've heard the impassioned pleas to leave that in there. And you also want to take it out of the work we want to do on the integrated transport strategy, yet we desperately need that to happen. And the annual Planners Conference, we do need to. We're going through a huge turbulent time in terms of local government, so making sure we're engaging properly is essential. So I do urge members to vote against this amendment.
Councillor Dawes, I think you. Did you? No? Okay.
Gooch still wants a second.
Councillor English.
In particular relation to the street cleaning issue, because we debated the other points earlier, I specifically raised with officers whether there was a need for additional resources for street cleaning in the run-up to the budget discussions. It was stressed to me very clearly that the issue isn't so much employing new people, it's actually filling to establishment our existing posts. There is pretty much no point in expanding the establishment of staff when we are currently carrying a number of vacancies. What we need to do is fill those vacancies and deal with that. All that this amendment achieves is removing resources that could be profitably used elsewhere in order to deal with a non-problem. Yes, street cleaning can be improved, but by bringing it up to the establishment that is already budgeted for and which should exist, and that is the solution, and that is what we will need to carry forward. I've addressed the other 2 points already in the previous.
Thank you, Councillor. Don't think it's anybody else, is it?
Gooch wants to return.
Councillor Gooch, yes, you are the seconder. Have the right to
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, I still see the citizenship panels, whatever you call them, it's overkill. We have the knowledge within us here. We have it out there. We've got the Citizens Advice Bureau, for example, who know the kind of people, the kind of problems that they have. There are all sorts of charities. I still see it as a waste of money, and I support this. As far as the annual parish council, the parish councils are concerned, we have an excellent relationship with our parish councils. We have one-to-ones with them frequently. Some of us are twin hatters. So please, let's just get on with it. Thank you.
That's good. That's good. Councillor Harper, you want to sum up?
Well, just to say that we are not against, we believe that the issue around violence against women and girls, which is going to go to overview and scrutiny, will go through a process which can start in the next couple of months. It will have the ability to invite independent witnesses, and also other members of the public and so on can address it. So we don't see voting for our amendment has any direct relationship with the issue of violence against women and girls. I think that is an unnecessary link and one that's not valid.
We're going to go to the vote, as before.
Okay, so just to be clear, the amendment that you are voting on is on page 29 of your briefing pack. I'm going to ask you again whether you're voting for, against or abstaining. So, Councillor Barwick.
Against.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Cannon.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Cleater.
Against.
Councillor Coates. Councillor Conyard.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Cox.
Against.
Councillor Cooch.
Against.
Councillor Dawes.
For.
Councillor English.
Against.
Councillor Forecast.
For.
Councillor Fort.
For.
Councillor Gooch.
For.
Councillor Harper. Councillor Harwood.
Against.
Councillor Higson.
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Jenkins Baldock.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Cadker.
Against.
Councillor Mackay.
Against.
Councillor Millam.
Against.
Councillor Dave Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Mark Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Parfitt.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Reardon,
For.
Councillor Rodwell,
Against.
Councillor Round,
For.
Councillor Russell,
For.
Councillor Janetta Sams,
Against.
Councillor Tom Sams, Councillor Spooner,
For.
Councillor Springett,
For.
Councillor Summerskill,
Against.
Councillor Sweetman,
Against.
Councillor Mike Thompson,
Against.
Councillor Stephen Thompson, Councillor Tabinski,
For.
Councillor
Against.
And against?
So, members, the position is that there were 17 votes in favour, 26 against, so the amendment falls.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. And I think, Councillor Harper, it's you again to move. Nor was mine, was it? It is now.
Right, it's read now. I'll start again. Every councillor here since 2022 has supported 1,000 affordable homes and its successor, Quality Homes for All. I've raised this issue frequently in terms of ensuring that there is sufficient subsidy money, the £50,000 per unit, to be available to safeguard the council house building strategy. This proposal will enable 445 homes to be available for rent, either preferably at social or if not at affordable rent, without having any ongoing revenue costs. To do this, we propose setting up a housing revenue account now and then transferring the money from the Housing Investment Fund together with £10 million of our unallocated general fund balance, leaving a balance on the general fund of just over £5.25 million, which is well in excess of the £4 million minimum the director advises us we need. Addressing the local housing crisis is surely one of our top priorities, and leaving a new stock of council houses would be part of the legacy of Maidstone Council to the current and future residents of Maidstone once this council is gone. We are suggesting doing it this way to safeguard Maidstone's reserves, which have been built up over the last few decades as a result of all previous councils wanting to ensure that we had reserves for a rainy day. As we're now going to be abolished by April 2028 under the local government reorganisation, I suggest the rainy day is now. Please vote for new council housing, support the amendment, and I reserve my right to reply under 15.9.2.
Councillor Dawes, I believe you are seconding this.
Yes, I'm seconding, and I reserve my right to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open it up, and I think we had a question already. Councillor Wales, I think. English. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thanks to Councillor Harper and Councillor Dawes for the time spent thinking about this amendment. The cross-party support on building affordable homes for all our residents is greatly valued. There are, however, good reasons to reject this amendment at this time, and I'll take the points in order. Setting up a housing revenue account. The vehicle for managing the council's housing stock has been on our radar for quite a while because we can only hold up to 200 affordable homes in our general fund. There is a report already scheduled for the Climate Transition Corporate Environment Services Policy Advisory Committee for the 4th of March and subsequent Cabinet meeting to explore the options available for the council. Reopening the HRA is not the only option, or that may be the favoured one, and I would not want us to be tied to this option without due consideration by the PAC and by the Cabinet. The second one is that all developments under the Quality Homes for All be transferred to the HRA. It would certainly be advisable to transfer affordable housing into the HRA, or whatever vehicle is chosen, but on completion of those properties. It would not be wise to transfer too soon, because we need maximum time to achieve surety of funding of social housing grant funding from Homes England to ensure they can be provided for affordable housing. If the developments were transferred too soon and that funding was not forthcoming, the Council would be fettered in terms of exploring alternative delivery or disposal models for those sites. Furthermore, with any development, it may be that some of the homes will need to be provided for a range of tenures, perhaps for cross-subsidy purposes. Delaying the transfer of homes closer to being completed will mean that the Council can be sure of only transferring the affordable housing elements of any development. The third point is the balance of the Housing Investment Fund be transferred to an HRA, or whatever model. Whilst in broad agreement with the transfer of funds, again, it would only be prudent to transfer such funds after the completion of the Council's financial statements for the preceding year, just to make sure those funds are available. And the transfer of a further 10 million of unallocated reserves into the HRA. Well, the Council's reserves serve a number of purposes, to include providing contingency against overspends across all Council services, and the transfer of such a large amount would negatively affect the Council's overall resilience. Whilst reserves would still be in excess of the minimum 4 million, very little headroom would then be left to allow for such unforeseen events, as the Director of Finance's statement of robustness of estimates and adequacy of reserves on page 153 of the agenda spells out various risks being faced by the Council, including rising temporary accommodation costs, which we have no control over, local government reorganisation, which we have no control over, and the risk of contractor insolvency, which again we have no control over. Councillor Harper and Councillor Dawes and other councillors can rest assured that they are pushing at an open door, and that I will be fighting the corner for housing and its funding at every opportunity, but the reasons outlined above would urge rejection of this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cleater, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reluctantly, I'm going to speak against this amendment. There's bits in it that are fine, but we know, look at Hampshire County Council. Look how healthy their reserves were, and then all of a sudden, things hit, and they were the, shall we say, the Premier League of reserves in local government. And to remove 10 million out of the reserves into a ring-fence fund is caught with danger. I absolutely agree. I think no one, and I remember coming to a Cabinet meeting when Councillor Reid was in Cabinet, to support social affordable housing. I think we all agree on that. I think this is around how we get there. So reluctantly, especially about point 21 with reserves, we've only got to look, we've got to have small things go wrong that have a massive impact on our funding, that reluctantly, I'm speaking against this, but with the reassurance that I think everyone's going to work together to achieve it. But at the end of the day, unlike other councils, we are fiscally prudent and always have been, no matter who's been in control. And I think that at the moment, not quite the right time. But as soon as those houses come on tap and we get the funding, then we transfer money over. In terms of setting up the HRA as soon as possible, I agree in terms of transferring the HIF money into there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. Councillor English.
I won't go into the technical reasons that Simon has quite ably outlined in relation to the first 3 points. All I would say is that the law of unintended consequences could easily hit us with point 4. If we reduce our general fund reserves to a point where they are insufficient, it wouldn't necessarily just be general issues that would be affected. It could be homeless people who do not fall within the remit of the HRA. So we could end up being in a situation where, through the best intentioned amendment designed to help people get homes, we actually are unable to assist people who would not necessarily fall into the HRA to actually get accommodation, which would be a very unfortunate law of unintended consequences, and one has to be very careful with that. Councillor Perry, when he was a Cabinet Member for Finance, and I have to say I think that he did an excellent job managing this council's finances, and was a man who took the small c conservative principle of prudence first, and I do think that we should adopt the small c conservative principle of maintaining enough prudential headway in our reserves to deal with unintended consequences. Whilst we would still legally be over the threshold, it's very tight, and we would not need a lot to go wrong to blow away most of those reserves. And of course you can't put the HRA money back very easily into the general fund. Once it's transferred, it's transferred. And so I very reluctantly, because this is a very nobly intentioned motion, and I do respect the principles behind it, I think it's well meant, and we need to work through and deliver the intention of this amendment, although we can't support the letter.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, the amendment was put forward when we believed we were going to be in the priority stream for local government review, and that would mean that the future of Maidstone might only be literally months before embargoes were put upon us. So the world's obviously changed because we're not in that. We're at the beck of the queue. We've heard from Councillor Wales this evening a lot of reassurance from our point of view, and I think everybody here, we're all working on the same page to get this thing done quickly. So as everybody has said, look, we're pushing, if you like, at an open door. We're happy to withdraw the amendment on the basis that we can work with the Cabinet outside this meeting to achieve the common results we all want. Thank you.
And Councillor Dawes, I assume as the seconder you're happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
Thank you. I had two other speakers, Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Mackay. I assume you don't want to speak. Thank you. Fine. Okay. Well, I think we're all agreed with that, so we can move on. Thank you. Now we're getting to the end, as they say. This again, I think, is Councillor Harper. You're on stage again. So.
Okay, so again, I think everybody, we've had lots of debates here over and at committees over the last few years around the future of the leisure centre at Moat Park. In 2024 at a budget meeting, the council agreed to get a new leisure centre or a completely refurbished leisure centre at Moat Park by 2031. And to support that approach, the current Serco contract was extended to April 2029 with extensions, annual extensions, to take it up to 2032 to allow for a new contract to be put in place for a new leisure centre. The proposed capital programme on page 263 of your pack proposes not to start work on the new leisure centre until 2028-29, which will be too late, as Maidstone Council will, in May 2027, start the process of transferring both staff and assets to the new unitary council, which will go live in April 2029. 28. A new council, a new unitary, will be facing funding crises with social care and homeless pressures, and it is unlikely in its first year to start plans to build a new leisure centre in Maidstone when it will have inherited existing ones, some of which have been recently refurbished at Larkfield, Tunbridge, Swanley, Tunbridge Wells, Edenbridge, Sevenoaks, Paddock Wood and Cranberry, all local authority controlled leisure centres which, if we go into West Kent, let alone. We want to safeguard a leisure centre in Maidstone for our 170,000 residents, bringing forward the proposals to start work this year rather than when the council has been abolished. This amendment will ensure that by the date we are abolished in 2028, works will be well in hand and a new council at that stage is unlikely to cancel a project where building works have started and contracts have been signed. This amendment will also enable us to align with our current Serco contract. Support our residents and leave a legacy. Vote for the amendment, please. And again, I reserve my right to reply under 1592.
Cox wants to come in. Cox.
Oh, I've got Councillor Russell second. Councillor Russell, I believe you wish to second this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I reserve my right to speak later. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Oh, I can stand up straight. So first of all, I wanted to thank Councillor Harper and Councillor Russell for keeping the issue of a leisure centre at the forefront of our minds. It's an important cause, and I've spoken before at PAX about how important an issue it is to me as well, for personal reasons, which I'm not going to bore you with here, but, you know, find me in a bar afterwards and I'll tell you. So I just wanted to outline, there's been some amazing work that's been going on in the Leisure Centre since 2024. £2.5 million spent on so many developments that have created awards for us, whether that's the splash pool and lagoon improvements, new soft play areas, a new gym refurbishment, cafe and reception spaces being improved, and the list goes on. Energy efficiency improvements, pool covers, glazed areas to reduce the amount of heating, and there's more to come in terms of the replacement of the original boilers and also putting in place heat recovery technology for energy efficiency. So that's really important, and that gives the current facility a shelf life, a projected life to at least 2032 when the Serco contract comes to its end in its current form. I'm absolutely with you that we've got to continue to have a compelling and attractive leisure facility within the borough, preferably with Olympic standard pool size. What I struggle with is the 60 million price tag, and I wasn't here when that was put together. But what I do know is that the surplus, the current annual surplus from the leisure centre is £158,000 a year. So if you're going to amortise that, that would take 380 years to pay back. So, you know, that's not viable. I've also looked at benchmarks of other facilities that were installed around the country where they've actually put in place new leisure centres. And they range from Spelthorne in Surrey, which actually implemented a passive house facility, award-winning, which came in at 9.4 million. And then Lichfield, a new suite of pools at 11.4. And even if we looked at splashes in Medway, that originally had a budget of 5 million for refurbishment. And when they got into the nitty-gritty, they discovered the building actually wasn't sound, so they had to do the full demolition and rebuilding at 25. That is still a long way south of 60. So I don't disagree with this paper, and I don't disagree with the principle. I just think we've got to do work over the next 4 or 5 years. And if, Councillor Harper, if we can bring that forward, we absolutely should and will, to find out what the real number is and how we can actually deliver this. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey, I think you put your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw members' attention to the final paragraph on page 61, which says the current building shows no signs of deterioration, it's been managed well, etc. So in some respects, there is no burning platform. I've also said at various points, we don't yet know the proper timetable, the agreed timetable for local government reorganisation, but we are also working with the Local Government Association to consider what steps we might need to change and probably prioritise should that timetable be accelerated. So I absolutely accept it would be great to move quickly on this, but I don't think the time is right to do it within this budget itself right now. So I do urge members to vote against it, but it is important, and it is, as Councillor Cox said, it's at the forefront of our minds.
Councillor Thompson, I think, was. Oh, thank you.
These papers, Councillor Harper, show us that we are listening very clearly to residents. We can see that on page 117, the response to surveys regarding infrastructure at 133 on the leisure centre itself. Very large number of people giving their wide range of
Councillor Zawinski, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, again, as usual, I'm disappointed because all I've heard tonight is Maidstone Town Centre, Maidstone Town Centre. When is this council going to start thinking about the rural areas? It seems to me that they are totally ignored all of the time. That is really all I want to say, but last time I saw the statistics on the leisure centre, something like 95% of the membership were within 10 minutes walking distance. So you tell me how that does benefit the residents of Headcorn or Oldcombe or places like that. It's about time we need to, yeah, and they need to drive and then pay for it, yeah, because they can't get a bus. And that's a fact. It seems to me that this council is continually ignoring the rural areas of this borough. Right, that's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor English, thank you.
Councillor Travinsky makes quite a good case against the amendment that's been proposed. One of the issues that has been raised in our consideration of leisure provision is what pattern you get in order to provide a leisure facility across the borough of Maidstone rather than concentrating all the leisure provision in one place. Being no doubt, though, we do need to address and solve the issue one way or the other. What concerns me about this particular proposal is set out at the bottom of page 62, the analysis of the amendment. The amendment proposes that the revenue cost of borrowing would be met by reducing the amount that is transferred to the Nature Recovery Fund as per recommendation 2 of the budget motion. In subsequent years, the cost of borrowing would have the effect of increasing the budget gap that will need to be met through further savings or increased income. So what we would have is a short-term funding mechanism and then a rather large and increasing gap in years to come. That's not a sensible, prudential approach to setting out a capital budget. However, we can't delay too long. I suspect that, like the previous motion, this was submitted when we thought we were on the fast track to devolution, and in that sense it makes actually does make some sense, because we were looking at a very short timetable. But actually, I think it's more important that we get this right and we have a sustainable funding mechanism for this, rather than raiding a pot that may be unpopular in certain circles for a short-term solution, which then becomes a long-term problem. So I do think that, again, we need to take forward the sentiments and the point and principle of this, so that we do get leisure provision, not just concentrated in the town centre, and we move forward on this, but we don't use an unsustainable financial mechanism which will get us in trouble and actually make it harder to provide leisure facilities, because we will have ratcheted up our debt.
Yeah.
Councillor Cleaton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, just picking up from that point, the amendment it refers to was lost. So actually, the Nature Recovery Fund money, which was in the amendment to be deleted and transferred here, is actually this year, you know, the current year as well. So again, it's taken a hit every single year. Now, I was personally under the previous administration, and this isn't having a go, but I know we had that big debate. I think I was one of the ones, I think, that we would have liked a new leisure centre, but we are where we are. And at the moment, again, I think it's well-meaning. I think we've all got this aspiration. I actually totally agree with Councillor Travinsky about the outlying areas, about not having access to things. When I lived in Germany, we actually all used the facilities at local schools. The school I went to had a swimming pool, and the local people could use that. I think what we need to do as well, especially for the outlying villages, is get really creative about how we work with partners to deliver that, because I can assure you, if I lived out in Oldcombe, well actually Councillor Barwick does, I wouldn't want to be driving in all the way to Maidstone to have a swim. Well, I wouldn't dry my hair probably, I'd just tie it, well not tie it back, but just brush it. But you know what I mean? I wouldn't want a long journey, go and do some exercise and then a long journey back. I want something that's local. So I think this is an ideal opportunity to be looking at how we can all work together creatively to deliver something. But in terms of finance, because Amendment 1 was lost, actually that transfer of funding isn't available as part of this motion. And that's the main point I wanted to make.
Are there any more? No? Then I'll ask Councillor Russell to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Picking up on some of these points as being the previous Cabinet Member for Leisure, amongst communities as well that I did, we've looked at some of this stuff. So you would not believe the grief that we got when we took out the 30 million that was sitting in the capital for the leisure centre last time. You know, everyone thought it was real money and it was there and it was waiting and we just had to spend it on a new centre. That's not how the capital programme works. It's an ambitious marker in stone that is set to achieve some real potential for our borough. And I don't think it's wrong to have ambitious targets set for our borough. We did some of the work with Sport England, we got them on board, and they looked at where the best location for a leisure centre would be, and they did say that Moat Park is the best location for a leisure centre. It's where 80% of our population are based, and whilst I'm sure we'd all love a leisure centre in all of our villages, yeah, bring a Marden one, bring a Yalding one, you know, the reality is that if we want to build a leisure centre and we are ambitious for our borough, that is the best location. To put it in Moat Park, to make sure that you can make the best use of health and well-being in the Grade 1 parkland setting, that is the best location. The social value of this leisure centre in the report tonight says it's worth 1.7 million. Dover, like the leisure centre that they built in Dover so much, they then went and did Deal as well. So we are thinking of this as a cost, but we also need to think of it as an asset. We don't need to build like for like. We could put in an Olympic-sized pool. One of our Paralympians that resides within the borough travels to Stratford to swim. We could have that here. We could hold competitions here. We could bring sport into the town centre. I don't think that is a bad ambition to have for our town centre. We need to think of some of the anchor points that will send it into the future, and sport and competitive sport, swimming, health, well-being is one of them. We could co-locate things like dentists or even a GP within the centre. You must get away from the like-for-like thing that we'd be putting back in. It's what I know we've done a lot with the building. I'm really happy that you like all the improvements that we've made. We tried hard to spend the money where we weren't spending the 30 million, and obviously it's reaped the rewards. But it won't last forever. It is a Triggers New Broom type building. We've done a bit, we've done a bit more, we've done a bit, we've done a bit more. If we need to aim to have a new leisure centre in 2032, we need to start thinking about it now. We need to put these markers in. It won't just fall down and then up pops a new one. We need to start some of this work. And I went to Spelthorne to visit it. The Eclipse Centre was actually 50 million. That's how much that build cost. And we are talking about a passive house type concept. Whether we went all the way and did it so that it was all certified, or you went part way, design and build, something along those lines. It is an ambitious marker in stone, and I get that. But don't we want that for Maidstone?
Councillor Harper, as the proposer, I'll ask you to sum up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Claudine has made some very eloquent points, and being chair of communities and leisure and sport over the last few years until the elections. Earlier, people talked about looking at stuff across the borough. Well, when I was chair of the council's Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee in 2018, we started an exercise called Making Maidstone More Active. And part of that was addressing this question of where to have sports facilities across the whole borough. And as the mayor will remember, one of the first things we did as part of that was myself and the then vice chair, who's no longer a councillor, went down to Staplehurst and looked how we could improve services down there, and subsequently a lot of that has gone on and has happened. So we were looking as a council right back in 2018 at precisely that issue. What came through very strongly is, as Claudine's just said, as Councillor Russell just said, was that Sports England and other experts advised us are the optimum site and the best place for a leisure centre, if we're only to have one at the scale of swimming pools, which are obviously more expensive, is Moat Park. And like elsewhere in the borough, we could perhaps look at things like sports halls, which obviously are a lot cheaper to provide. The figure of £60 million, I'm afraid, comes from council officers, who I know are still currently in post. They're the ones who advised a year ago that we should be looking at the figure of £60 million, and they're the ones I would assume would still be advising that based on the information they have. And it'd be great, God, if we could actually deliver a leisure centre, a high-quality passive house, with perhaps a 50-metre pool, and we could get it for 30 million quid, that'd be excellent, because it would mean, if we wished to at that stage, we could provide much better sports facilities across the remainder of the borough. I suspect, though, the way building costs go, that that's probably an unlikely scenario. And yes, you're right about if we're advancing it as we suggest earlier, there are capital costs. But the evidence is from Dover and lots of councils where they have invested in new facilities, that the actual usage goes up between 100 and 300%, and that's actually based on the evidence. And based on that, you then generate sufficient additional revenue to enable you to pay the capital financing charges. And just finally, I would say, looking at your own budget proposals, you're proposing to open a new leisure centre here in 2032. That's in the briefing. What we're saying, let's aim to do it a year early, start the work earlier, because even though we're not in the priority schemes, I suspect at some point there will be an embargo on local authorities who are being closed down in terms of committing large future capital expenditure. So please vote for the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hobart. I think we now go for the same procedure. The final one. Oh, no, it's not, is it? No, no, it's not. I apologise.
Okay, so this is the last amendment. Okay, so just to remind members, this is the amendment set out on page 59 of the amendment pack. Okay, we ready? Councillor Barwick.
Against.
Councillor Burke.
For.
Councillor Cannon.
For.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Cleater.
Against.
Councillor Coates. Councillor Conyard.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Cooch.
Against.
Councillor Cox.
Against.
Councillor Dawes.
For.
Councillor English.
Against.
Councillor Forecast. Councillor Fort.
For.
Councillor Gooch.
For.
Councillor Harper.
For.
Councillor Harwood.
Against.
Councillor Hickson.
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Jenkins Baldock.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Cadker.
Against.
Councillor Mackay.
Against.
Councillor Millam.
Against.
Councillor Dave Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Mark Nagy.
Against.
Councillor Parfitt.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Reardon.
For.
Councillor Rodwell.
Against.
Councillor Round.
For.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Janetta Sams. Councillor Tom Sams. Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor Springett.
For.
Councillor Summersgill.
Against.
Councillor Sweetman.
Against.
Councillor Mike Thompson.
Against.
Against.
Councillor Jabinski,
Against.
Councillor Wales,
Against.
and Councillor Wilby.
And against.
Thank you. So members, the votes for are 16, against 27, so the amendment falls.
Okay. Right, members. None of the members have passed, obviously. I think that's fairly obvious. So we're back to the original motion, which is now the substantive motion. But before we do vote on it, does anybody wish to comment? Any members wish to say anything? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Councillor English, I'm not surprised.
I reserve my right, but I will simply say I'd like us to move to the vote.
Okay, thank you. Right, we can go straight to the vote. Do you want to sum up, Councillor? You sound surprised. But
Oh, yes. No,
it's all right.
Let's pass this budget and get home.
I'm afraid we have to have a name vote, but we'll do it as quickly as we can. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready? I think we are beginning to build up a head of steam on this. Okay. Councillor Barwick, we're voting on the substantive, which is 4. Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Against.
Councillor Cannon.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Cleater.
4.
Councillor Coates. Yeah, it's you again. This. I don't know.
Say it again.
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor Conyard.
4.
Against.
Councillor Cooch.
4.
Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Dawes.
Against.
Councillor English.
4.
Councillor Forecast. Councillor Fort.
Against.
Councillor Gooch.
4.
Councillor Harper.
4.
Councillor Harwood.
4.
Councillor Higson.
4.
Councillor Jeffrey.
4.
Councillor Jenkins Baldock.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Cadker.
4.
Councillor Mackay has left the chamber, so if he returns before we finish the vote, I will go back to him. Councillor Millam.
4.
Councillor Dave Nagy.
4.
Councillor Mark Nagy.
4.
Councillor Parfitt.
Against.
Councillor Perry.
Against.
Councillor Reardon.
Against.
Councillor Rodwell.
4.
Councillor Round. Councillor Russell.
Against.
Councillor Janetta Sams. 4.
Councillor Tom Sams, Councillor Spooner,
Against.
Councillor Springett,
Against.
Councillor Summerskill,
For.
Councillor Sweetman,
For.
Councillor Mike Thompson,
For.
Councillor Stephen Thompson,
For.
Councillor Chabinsky,
Against.
Councillor Wales,
For.
Councillor Wilby,
For.
Councillor Mackay.
For.
Thank you. So, members, if I could summarise for you, that's 28 votes in favour, 15 against, and so the motion is carried.
Right. With some relief, we go on to the next agenda item 20. This is the calendar of meetings. So,
Mr.
I
Mayor.
call on the Director of Strategy, Insight and Governance to submit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend the report to Council.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I wish to ask the Director whether there is any flexibility in the meeting timetable, because the scheduling of this event during the half-term holiday makes it extremely difficult for councillors with children.
Thank you for the question. So the council meeting in February is timetabled to be held after the budget setting meetings of the other three preceptors. So Police and Crime Commissioner had their meeting 4th of February, Kent County Council was 12th of February, and Kent Fire and Rescue was yesterday, 18th of February. So the flexibility, we couldn't move it back, so it couldn't be earlier in February. However, we could move it to a week later if we swap with the Cabinet meeting, so it's held on the 25th of the month. However, I would point out this will shorten the timetable for annual billing, so it makes that harder, and it wouldn't allow much leeway if an adjournment was required in terms of the budget, but that's for you to decide.
Could I suggest, sorry, Mr. Mayor, could I suggest that that change is made then?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Swapping the date of the council meeting and the Cabinet meeting.
Councillor, do you have a seconder for that? Oh, there's several hands going up. Councillor Harwood, you were first, apparently. So the quickest with the arm. Okay. Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I reserve my right.
Right. Okay. Councillor Dawes, you want to speak?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the pack for the housing, and the audit committee happens to be on a Monday and on a Tuesday, and over the course of the year, every other month, a pack meeting for housing have been cancelled, which means that the workloads have been pushed to the following months. So every 2 months, I'm crazily reading through the audit committee and housing committee, which are Monday and Tuesday. Can I possibly ask that actually the audit committee is on 1 month and the housing committee is on, or even spread out of a week, so I've got times to read through the paper, because it seems like everything is concentrated for every 2 months on 2 days. There's a bit of leverage there.
I moved a formal amendment that needs to take priority.
Yeah, I agree. We need to debate that first, or question that. Does anybody wish to come forward? Otherwise, we can go straight to a vote on it.
I'd like to move straight to a vote. It's a
Okay.
straightforward issue.
Yep, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Okay, so I think everybody's clear on the.
So just to explain, an amendment was moved before the item on the agenda had been moved and seconded. So if we could go through that step first. Okay, you're giving me...
Yeah, apologies, and apologies for the confusion. So, because I can only commend the report, Councillor English has in effect moved it with an amendment that's been seconded. So now we could debate the amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Dawes.
It's possible, isn't it?
What was the question?
Okay. If we could have a little bit of hush. Councillor Dawes, do you have an amendment that you wish to move?
Yes.
Can you tell us what it is, please?
So I would like to move that audit and housing committee pack are in separate weeks as a minimum.
Okay, so if...
CV, can we have, please?
Did I confuse everybody by saying housing and community? I meant the housing pack and the audit committee.
No,
Sorry,
you didn't,
okay.
but from what I understand, the individual packs are not separately identified on the calendar, and so, given the point that you have raised, it's something that we can take into account when we're doing the detail of the scheduling. If you're content for that, then you don't need to move an amendment.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Right. Councillor English, your attention, please. I think you've moved, what you've moved now is the substantive. Yep. So that's what we're going to vote on. Everybody happy with that? Okay then. So is everybody aware of what we're voting on? Okay then. So who's it? You better handle it. Oh, okay. Are we in agreement? Are we in agreement? Yay! Thank you. Thank God for that.
So I think that's agenda item 20 done, isn't it? Okay, members, we're on to the nice bit now, hopefully. So, appointment of Mayor Select 2025-2026. This is the handing over of the crown, in other words. Okay. Well, the mace. I'm going to walk off with the mace. So, in accordance with the agreed protocol on mayor and deputy mayor pre-selection, other than exceptional circumstances, the mayor should be first have held the post of deputy mayor. I never did, so that's an interesting one. Maybe it's showing up now, but the deputy mayor in the first year preceding the mayor election, the deputy mayor is not working. It's not working.
See, I have the power of silence already.
Power of silence. Oh, that one's on. Yeah, that one's definitely on. Oh gosh, that's a lot different. Okay, everybody, you can hear. Okay, so so Martin's been my deputy, and so I look to Councillor Zabrinski to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mark, you've been sitting there very patiently all night. I wonder if you thought we were going to get there or not. Mr. Mayor and esteemed Maidstone Borough councillors, it gives me great pleasure to propose Councillor Martin C.T. Round be appointed as Mayor Select for the municipal year 2025-26, following a successful year as Deputy Mayor supporting our current Mayor. I said many things about Martin's qualities and character last year when nominating him as Deputy Mayor, and I've saved more for the actual inauguration. But I will say that Martin has some big plans for his year as Mayor, and I'm positive it will be a year for all of us and our residents to be proud of and to remember. So watch this space. I would also like to take this particular opportunity, as we're all here in this historic building with the names of previous mayors detailed on its walls, to say that I will be doing my utmost to ensure that the centuries-old tradition of Mayor of Maidstone continues, and any reorganisation of local government respects that tradition. And I call on all here present to also do their best to ensure this tradition, which is very important to the county town of Kent, does not fall by the wayside. Thank you.
That's on. Thank you, Councillor Phoenix. I call on Councillor English.
Firstly, my colleague Councillor Nagy would have been doing this, but unfortunately his voice isn't up to this. But it is an honour and a privilege myself to be seconding Councillor Round for nomination for Mayor. I've known him and his family for more years than I care to remember. Throughout that period, they, and in particular Martin, have shown a penchant for service to the community, not just in Headcorn and the other villages and communities that he represents, including Oldcombe, Porton Malaby. He has worked tirelessly to represent his constituents and the broader people of Maidstone. He's been indefatigable in promoting cultural events and activities, and has done many of the jobs within this council. I think that there are very few people in this chamber, in the past, in the present, and presumably in the future, who are as worthy of nomination of Mayor of Maidstone as Councillor Martin Round. I personally will give him as much support as I can, not just as Mayor, but as a friend, and I hope other people will do. To pick up the final point from Councillor Travinsky, I personally intend to see the office of Mayor continue so long enough that my esteemed colleague, Councillor Harwood, finally has to pick up the baton. So you can be assured of my support, if only for that reason. All joking aside, the corporate history of the Borough of Maidstone is a fine one, and it needs to be preserved. Our current borough is not the original incarnation that had the original charter back in 1549, so I'm sure that we shall be able to continue that. And Councillor Round, you will not be amongst the last mayors of Maidstone, but you may be amongst the best.
Thank you. Yep. Councillor Stephen Tyson, thank you for those very nice words, Martin. Thank you, Clark. Councillor Steve Dumpton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Martin, thank you for this invitation. A year ago or thereabouts, I think I said that we were lucky to have Councillor Perry and yourself sitting before us, and I think I suggested that you'd be, I'm not sure if I use the phrase power couple, but I'm going to go with it now, and I feel somewhat vindicated. There are indeed serious and unplumbed changes ahead of this council and of this community. So I, for one, am grateful that we've had John and yourself with us over the last year, and that I'm sure we'll look forward to your advice and wise oversight and companionship in this chamber and beyond. There will need to be change in what the mayoralty looks like. I don't have an agenda for that. I look forward to hearing what yours will be. Councillor Round, it was my privilege to sit at the table there just a few weeks ago when we had a youth advisory committee in this room where some outstanding, inspiring young people came to visit a select group of these members. I'm very sorry for those of you that missed out. Those of us that were in the room had an utterly brilliant time. And Councillor Round, you brought your best game as a local politician, as a ward councillor, as a professional of experience to the subject of mental health and our deliberations about it. And a stranger to the meeting would not have been able to tell the politics of most of the people in the room, and they certainly wouldn't have noted what yours were. I hope that's a compliment. It's intended to be that way. You played the ball and the game, and I was grateful for that then. As Councillor English has said, we may be looking forward to another excellent mayoral year with novelty, creativity and a contribution to the legacy of the office, and I'm happy to, delighted in fact, to support your position as Mayor next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, it's very nice. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I've been there, I've done it, and I'm so pleased, Martin, that it is now your turn. I think you've proved your worth during this past year, your sheer commitment and actually love of the job. You took to it like a duck to water in great support of our lovely Mayor John. Do you know, the year's gone by quickly, hasn't it? But Martin, I think you will be an excellent mayor. and a really worthy follower in the footsteps of our current Mayor, Councillor Perry, who has, you've done such a wonderful job, and I do think that Councillor Round will be a most worthy successor, and I look forward to it very much. So I think I'm supposed to say that I fully support, on behalf of the independent group, I fully support your appointment as Mayor-Select 2025-26.
That's lovely, thank you, Councillor Gooch. And last but very much not least, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've got to say, it's a privilege to be asked to second Martin Round as Mayor of Maidstone. I could not think of a better person to do that role. He's parish councillor of Headcorn since 2004. Maidstone Borough Council 2014. But this goes nowhere near describing Martin Round. Over a beer or two in Spooners, we found, despite our current differences in politics, we shared a lot in common. Similar experiences, and taste in music was one of them. Now, I suspect that our politics in the 1970s, and that's the era where we were referring to, were not as diverse as they are today, but that's only speculation. Martin was in a band in his youth called Mist Around. This is now his handle for political blogging. From mistaround.com you will find some interesting and fascinating facts, such as over 25 years to 35 years ago, I was involved in a very high level national, European and international politics in key areas. I believe that Martin is a secret Austin Powers character. In addition, Martin is keeping relevant. A recent post on X, formerly Twitter, navigating economic challenges, where he discusses the need to drive innovation and economic growth. See, I have looked you up, Martin. Exactly. Yeah. This is just a small part of Martin's life. His work at times, you know, I don't think you ever stop working, do you, Martin? No, never will you. But I'd like to take, as other councillors have, the opportunity to say that while Maidstone Borough Council may not exist in 2 to 3 years, I hope that Maidstone Town Council can be formed into a town council and the position of mayor retained. And I hope that officers and councillors can work towards that end. But it leaves me to say it is a pleasure to support Martin Round as Mayor of Maidstone for 25-26. Martin, congratulations.
That's very, very nice. Thank you. Just do this bit. Are there any other nominations? I'm sorry, I've got to say that. I don't see any. Well, that's not a very good thing to say, so I can't see anybody anyway. So, right. Is the motion agreed? Agreed! Lovely. Now, before we go, there's one more to do, but I've got to say we might just exceed the 10:30. So I just want to say we might need a small extension to get all this done. I don't mean it in that way, but you know what I'm trying to say. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. We'll definitely finish by 11, but I think we'll finish before then, a long time. Okay. Right. So let me move on to agenda item 22, which I think is the final agenda item. Appointment of Deputy Mayor Select for 2025-2026 in accordance with the agreed protocol on Mayor and Deputy Mayor pre-selection. The most senior member of the Council as set out in the order of seniority by length of service of members who has not previously held the office of Mayor, who wishes to take up the office and who has served for a minimum period of 6 years should be appointed to the position of Deputy Mayor. That person is Councillor Brian Clark. So I would like to look to Councillor Wilby to move. Thank you. Move the motion.
Yes, and thank you for that, Mayor. I'm going to make this very quick, so I'll get the legal bit out of the way first. So it's a privilege and an honour to nominate Councillor Brian Eugene Clark, and I nominate him to be appointed as the Deputy Mayor select for the municipal year 2025-26. Brian has been a fantastic councillor and a friend to myself over the years. Hair's changed a bit over the years, and I've lost all of mine at the same time, so to go with it. He works tirelessly as a borough councillor, and throughout our community, he's a well-respected person. I'm sure, like Derek Mortimer before, my other fellow councillor, he'll put his own stamp on the position. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilby. And I'll just move to Councillor Gooch to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say, Brian, you're sitting quietly at the back there. You're always soft-spoken, but your courage and forthrightness in doing and saying what you think was right at all times has always been strong and highly commendable. I know I have listened to you across the chamber sometimes, and I thought, oh, yes. You bring out, you're so committed, and I think this is just the right thing for you. I'm so pleased for you. And I know that you've served as a county councillor as well, and I'm sure you gave them a good run for your money there, just as well as you have done in this chamber. But I wish you all the very best. I know it will be a new experience for you. You will love it. I just hope that you manage to get enough training from Councillor Round, because he will grab it he loves it so much. So you'll have to grab it from him and say, oi, let me do some, because I know what he's like. But you will love it, and I'm so pleased for you, and I congratulate you. And on behalf of the independent group, I'll find it in a minute, just a minute. On behalf of the independent group, we fully support your appointment of Deputy Mayor Select 25-26. Congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Well, I'm going to speak next. I'm going to, because Brian, you've been a colleague for a long time, and you've been a county councillor for a very long time as well, and a borough councillor. When you speak on planning and you speak on the other committees, you always make huge sense. And I know you've got a huge amount of experience, and I think all of us really respect that. And I'm sure you'll be an absolutely fabulous deputy mayor and then a mayor, because I think you've got all the qualities to be a very, very great mayor. And I think that the role of the mayor is important. I really appreciated a lot of the comments that you've made as members, because I do feel very strongly about the importance of the mayoralty. I think it's got a long history, but I think you'll be a very, very fine mayor. And I'll also say, I was absolutely delighted when you contacted me, because Brian, not all of you know this, is a major contributor to the economic well-being of the Republic of Staplehurst, and that, of course, again, is very, very important. But yeah, but thank you for asking me, because I was very delighted to support you, and I'm sure you'll do a marvellous job. Thank you. Right. And I'd like to, Councillor Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you. Like others, I've been really pleased to have been asked to support Brian. I've known him for years. I've known of him even longer, and I've always been really impressed by his passion and commitment. That word's come up a couple of times. That commitment to his communities, whether it's delivering Easter eggs or putting up dodgy diversion signs. I'm just, that commitment is absolutely there. So I am certain that Brian's going to be an awesome mayor, and I look forward to seeing him in that role.
And thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Cleaton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm really honoured to speak on behalf of my group to support your nomination as Deputy Mayor Select. The most time I see Brian actually is when we're literally banging our heads off a table at joint transportation boards, along with other colleagues as well who've been of all parties, and it's been very frustrating at times. But I know that you are a committed ward councillor, that you very much put the people you represent at the heart of what you do. We sort of straddle, if you like, the Sutton Lewes Road, and we get the same emails and the same anger from people, that we work hard to actually reach a resolution along with county councillors and the local MPs. But you will make an absolute star team. I mean, I think you'll probably go, let's just say you might have to get a few more waistcoats to compete with Martin. But let me reassure people here, Liverpool has a mayor, as in what we have. It has a mayor, we won't mention Joe Anderson, and it has a Metro mayor, which is Steve Rotherham. So I think no matter what happens in local government review, there is the opportunity to ensure that that mace, historical though it is, will remain and be used. And I look forward to seeing you and Martin complete your work. And as John will tell you, whenever I can, I try to support the mayoral events. And I look forward to the work that you're both going to do to make Maidstone on the map a better place, and to support some wonderful charities that I'm sure both of you are really committed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleaton. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the mace, because the mayor who gave the mace to Maidstone had to leave the country in a hurry. You see his name on the board there. His second time as mayor, he had to escape being arrested. So, but he didn't go off with the mace. So that was the main thing, I think. But anyway, just to complete this, are there any other nominations? No, I don't think so. So is the motion agreed? Agreed. Right. Well, thank you all. I can declare this meeting finished, completed. We've done it in time. And thank you very much for your discussion. And thank you for putting up with me. I hope I wasn't too hesitant. So thank you. I'll leave everything here. I'll come back. Yeah, thank you. I definitely need